Welcome back to the channel. Today we will travel through the pages of What If Deku gained powers to change his fate part 4. The link to the story will be in the description below, and if you want an update of the current series, join the Discord. Now let's start. Chapter 10. My Hero Academia Ost. Izuku's Crisis. Morgana and Ryuji stared at Izuku in bewilderment, his declaration of responsibility catching them both off guard. Izuku knew it might be a bit hard for them to accept, but he didn't want to keep his decision a secret. With everything they had been through and were about to take on, Izuku wanted to be honest with Ryuji and Morgana. They didn't deserve to be blindsided should the worst come to pass. What? Ryuji and Morgana cried out, both taking a step toward Izuku. Dude, what the hell? You can't do that. Ryuji argued, panic written all over his face. Don't worry. I'm not going to say anything about you, Ryuji-senpai. I'm going to take all the blame. Izuku tried to reassure, staying firm in his decision. That's not what I mean. I mean that you shouldn't give yourself up like that. Ryuji retorted, stomping his foot in frustration. Forget having a record, you'll be put in jail. That bastard ain't worth your entire future. It's not about Kamoshida. It's about what I can accept. Izuku admitted, eyes falling to the ground as sweat started to trail down his brow. I decided that I would do this for the students who couldn't do anything about it. For Suzui-senpai. But I'm still afraid of what might result from this. Looking up, Izuku turned his attention to Morgana. You said it before. Heroes take chances every time that they go out and use their powers. But they would also be held accountable for making a mistake like killing someone. So I'll hold myself accountable if that's what happens. Izuku. Ryuji muttered, unsure what else to say. The conviction in Izuku's eyes repelled him from trying to argue. Izuku had decided to shoulder the burden of responsibility. He could see little in the way of convincing him otherwise. But how will you be able to convince the cops you did it? Morgana asked, his eyes and tone conveying his own concern. I'll say that I awakened to my quirk late. Izuku sighed, scratching the back of his head. I'll say that I realized what I was capable of but went too far and killed him by accident. Silence soon followed, Izuku's partners in crime soaking in his words. There wasn't much to be said on the matter. Izuku wasn't going to fold under their arguments, that was painfully obvious to them. Knowing that, though, Ryuji and Morgana nodded in acceptance. Alright, then. With all that said, let's make sure we don't kill that asshole. Ryuji smirked, stuffing his hands into his pockets. That works for me. I'll make sure we do things right. It would look bad on me if I allowed that kind of result in my first attempt at guiding you two, anyway. Morgana chuckled, looking up at Izuku with a smile. You guys, Izuku muttered, giving them both a thankful smile. Yeah, so don't go giving up your freedom just yet. Ryuji said with a more energetic grin, punching Izuku lightly in the shoulder. We got this. Izuku nodded, gripping his hand in front of him. Right. Let's go. He told them, his partners in crime nodding in agreement. They didn't take another moment, heading for the side entrance. At this point, it was obvious for Izuku and Ryuji that going through the front was a mistake. Hopping through the front window, the three scanned the room for any guards, thankful that it was empty. I guess we're lucky that the guards don't bother to check every room. Izuku hummed in thought, walking forward and opening the door slowly. He peered out, looking left and right quickly to make sure the coast was clear. He stopped though when he could see a gathering of guards in the main hall. What's going? Ryuji began to ask, only for Izuku to quickly silence him with a motion. He signaled for the two to join him, Morgana and Ryuji, slowly peering out beside him to see the guards. Holy shit, there's so many of them. Alright, man. Listen up. Izuku and Ryuji widened their eyes when they heard Kamoshida's voice booming. He wasn't visible in their line of sight, but they guessed he was at the front of the hall as he spoke to them. It seems that some rats might be running around my precious castle, again. If they think they can just waltz around like they own the place, they can think again. Find the rats and put them out of their misery. Don't bother trying to capture them. Yes, King Kamoshida. His entourage proclaimed, stepping into formation before beginning to disperse. That cocky bastard will show him soon enough. Ryuji growled, the three retreating back into the room. Alright, so how we go about destroying this castle, Mona? First we must find the source of Kamoshida's distorted desires, which I have dubbed the treasure of the palace. Morgana explained, placing his paws on his hips. Once we find that, all we have to do is steal it. There's going to be a few more steps to it from there, but I'll explain that once we've located our target. So where exactly is the treasure, then? Izuku asked thoughtfully, peering slightly out the door to keep an eye out. Does Kamoshida have it on him? Not likely. While the king might be full of himself, even he will go to great lengths to protect his treasure. Morgana dismissed, shaking his head. No, it's going to be more difficult than that, unfortunately. Palace rulers keep their treasure in the most secured part of the castle. It's unlikely that we're going to find it on this floor, in fact. Damn. Guess this ain't gonna be an in and out job, huh? Ryuji grumbled, kicking the rug in annoyance. No. This is going to take us some time, I think. We might not even be able to accomplish everything in one day. Morgana declared honestly, turning his head to the side in thought. What we need to do right now is establish a path to the treasure. Now, considering the dungeon is all that is downstairs, we can safely cross it off our list of places to check for the treasure. Yamashita will likely have it in the highest part of the castle, then. He'd want to keep it as far away from others as possible, right? Izuku guessed, holding his chin as he tilted his head down. If the overall size of the castle is the same as the school, it should only be 3 floors. 4 if you count the rooftop. You might be right, but trust me when I say that it's likely that all 4 floors will be quite different as we go up. Things are only going to get tougher as we get closer to the treasure, after all. Morgana warned, eliciting a grunt from Ryuji. Well, I guess we knew things weren't gonna be that easy. Let's get going then. Ryuji sighed, rolling his arm and getting ready to move. Izuku and Morgana took another peek outside the room, seeing that the knights had dispersed to different parts of the castle. Motioning back to him, Ryuji quickly followed after Izuku and Morgana into the next room across the hall. Pushing the doors open, Izuku widened his eyes when he came face to face with a guard, balancing lamely on one foot as he tried to regain his composure. "How the intruders?" the knight exclaimed, stomping toward the 3. "Let's take it out." Ryuji snarled, rushing past Izuku this time. He swung a pipe forward in hand, the weapon having materialized alongside his persona like Izuku's staff. He smashed the hunk of metal into the knight, knocking it off balance and causing it to stumble back. Ooze spilled from behind its mask, covering its body before materializing into the blue-clad pixie they had seen the last time. "Nice hit, Skull. Now bring out your guns," Morgana ordered, looking at Izuku. "Our guns?" Izuku muttered in question before it suddenly occurred to him. Reaching into his jacket pocket, he was surprised when he produced the model gun of Snipe's revolver. Looking over at Ryuji, his eyes widened to find him with a model shotgun in hand, the delinquent beaming in amazement. "Aw, hell yeah. Let's do some damage." Ryuji laughed, pointing his gun forward. Izuku followed suit, the two preparing to open fire upon the pixie. Wait, don't shoot. I won't tell Lord Kamishita," the pixie begged, holding its hands together in fear. Ryuji and Izuku widened their eyes in shock, having not realized before that the shadows could actually feel fear, much less beg for mercy. "Yeah, right. Like we're gonna fall for that." Ryuji grunted, snapping back into reality. "Don't listen to it, Izuhiro. It's just trying to get the jump on us." "Don't be too sure, Skull. Even though shadows are beings formed by negative emotion, they still have the fear of death in them." Morgana pointed out, smirking in thought. "This is actually a good chance to show you guys another tactic. Something I like to call a hold-up." "A hold-up?" Izuku repeated, eyes snapping between Morgana and the shadow, making sure not to drop his guard. "That's right. I'll start this off." Morgana skipped forward, clearing his throat. "Alright, Shadow. If you want to make it out of here alive, you better have something good for us." I have money. Place please, here, take it." The pixie pleaded, reaching into its non-existent pockets before producing a 1,000 yen bill. "Wait, what the hell? Is that real money?" Ryuji gasped, stepping forward and snatching the money from the pixie's hand. "That's right. Shadows are aware of what humans collectively desire. For the most part, it's money. In some cases, though, you can get an item from a shadow instead. Something that could help us out while we're in a palace." Morgana explained before looking back at the shadow, leering. "Alright, you can go. Thank you. But you'll never be able to beat King Kamishita. That money won't mean much." It laughed, getting in the last word before spreading its wings and floating away from them. "Is it really okay to be letting that thing fly off like that?" Ryuji asked, walking over to join Morgana with Izuku. "Won't it go tell other guards where we're at?" "Not likely. When a shadow has been released like that one was, it usually returns to a distorted formless state. We don't have to worry about enemies getting away or helping out another enemy in the long run after defeating them," Morgana explained, crossing his paws over his chest. "I see that solves one problem," but Izuku muttered, a small bead of sweat on his cheek as he scratched his head. "I'm not sure how I feel about the whole hold-up thing, though. It wasn't much of a surprise to Ryuji or Morgana that the green-haired teen felt conflicted over the tactic. They were basically robbing the shadows at gunpoint. "Don't worry so much about it, hero. It's not like they're actual people. Just some distorted emotions or whatever Mona said." Ryuji tried to reassure, patting him on the back. "Skull is right, as hard as that is to believe." Mona chuckled, earning a glare from the faux blonde. "Don't think of our enemies as innocent bystanders or even as people. They're nothing more than dark emotions taking physical form. Izuku rubbed his arm hesitantly, but nodded in acceptance. I suppose it will be beneficial to be able to get something out of our encounters with shadows. Even if it seems like a dirty tactic. Ever the straight arrow, hero. Your codename is becoming more and more fitting. Morgana chuckled, turning and skipping forward. Come on. Let's find some more enemies. We're going to have to put in a bit of practice for you. Why you want to keep trying it? I guess I'm back in. To say that Anne was confused by everything she saw would be an understatement. When Midoriya and Ryuji had forced her into the alley, she quickly tried to chase after them, but found she was back on the school grounds, students carelessly passing by without giving her any notice. Anne had so many questions running through her head. She wanted to know what those two were up to. She wanted to know what that place was. How it would do anything to put an end to Kamoshida. But as she scoured the school gate for answers, Anne was about ready to give up hope of knowing anything until she saw the two again. That was until a strange app appeared on her phone. Anne had recalled what the phone had repeated before to Izuku and Ryuji, thankfully, and repeated the words to her own phone. Before she even realized it, Anne was faced once again with the same layout that she saw when she followed the two. They were both gone, but the castle was still largely present. I can't believe it, so that was real, Anne muttered, eyes trailing up as she examined the castle, subconsciously gulping. The red stone walls were intimidating, looming over her like a great shadow blotting out the sun. What exactly did that phone app do? Anne gripped her fist, shaking her head and strengthening her resolve. Whatever this castle was, whatever Ryuji and Izuku were planning, it was definitely meant to take down Kamoshida. And Anne refused not to be a part of that. I'll find out what those two are up to. Princess. Anne blinked when she heard "speak up." The voice was neither Ryuji or Izuku. When she looked ahead, she saw several men in towering armor approaching her, the sight causing her to recoil. Who are you guys? Anne asked in fear, her words doing little to stop them from approaching. Princess. They called out with more urgency, the guards rushing faster and surrounding Anne. Hey. Get away from me. Anne cried out, powerless to stop the guards from taking her in hand and carrying her inside the castle. Hey, alright. Gee, give me whatever you have. Money or items, please. The trio of phantom thieves had encountered several shadows at this point, though they hadn't been able to get the drop on them like they had with their first enemy. The first few encounters, while going well enough that they defeated them with little trouble, they had not been able to do another hold up until this point. Unfortunately for Izuku, Morgana urged him to take the lead in the interrogation. Was that really the best you could do? Pixie asked in disappointment, her fear of death almost gone, thanks to Izuku's meek proclamation. Sweat dripped down Izuku's face as he gulped in embarrassment. He knew this would likely be a challenge for him to do. For one, Izuku was still a bit reluctant to do the hold-ups in the first place because of the ethical questionability of them. Second, Izuku was still not the most confident when addressing others. While he was starting to become more comfortable around certain people, this was a completely different situation. As things were, he was failing miserably at looking or sounding intimidating. We really need to work on your execution, Hero Morgana muttered to the green-haired teen with a sigh, Izuku rubbing his head. Hey. Don't get all smart with us if you know what's good for you. Ryuji snapped, pumping his shotgun as he decided to take over for his friend. Give us what you got if you want to make it out of here alive. The pixie become alert again, holding its hands up in surrender. Please don't hurt me. But this happened so suddenly and I don't have anything to give you. The three stiffened at her answer, Izuku and Ryuji looking at one another before both glanced at Morgana for answers. The cat merely scratched behind his ear sheepishly before coughing out. I wasn't prepared for what should happen if they didn't have anything. I suppose we'll just have to send her to hell, instead. What? No way. The pixie cried out in fear, eyes darting from each person, her eyes pleading for an escape. Please. There has to be a way that you let me go, instead. Sorry, but we're kind of in a hurry. It's faster to just eliminate you. Morgana shrugged, holding his slingshot higher and aiming for her head. Geez, it sounds pretty damn cruel when he says it out loud, Ryuji muttered, though preparing to blast the shadow to pieces. Regardless. Wait. We can just let her go. Izuku suggested this time, looking between his two friends. I understand eliminating shadows when we don't have a choice, but looking down at the pixie, Izuku's expression softened. Even if it wasn't human and killing it wasn't the same as any other sentient being, he couldn't just watch as they shot the shadow in cold blood. Well, like you said, there's no real problem if we let it go, since it can't warn other shadows, right? Well, that is true, Morgana relented, slightly lowering his slingshot. I guess if it's that big of a deal for you, then we can let it go. Really you will, the pixie smiled hopefully, gaze turning to Izuku. I guess you're the type who tries to be nice to everyone, huh? Izuku felt embarrassed being told that, especially since he was supposed to be the aggressor in this situation. Despite this, the shadow gave a small giggle and a gentle smile. It's okay, though. I don't mind that in a guy. In fact, the pixie suddenly froze, eyes literally shining as realization crossed her expression. I am thou. Huh? Izuku blinked in confusion, glancing at Morgana. The cat seemed just as confused, Mona's eyes wide in shock. What's going on? This is Morgana muttered, raising his slingshot again due to his confusion, but not shooting. Mona. She's doing something weird. Ryuji exclaimed, unsure if he should open fire. I don't belong to King Kamoshida. I never did. The shadow declared slowly, raising its body from the ground as a blue aura started to surround its body, eyes peering directly into Izuku's. I'm an existence that drifts about in the sea of humanity's souls. My real name is Pixie. And from now on I shall live in thy heart. The blue energy enveloped Pixie's being, flashing brightly before taking a smaller shape, the shape of Izuku's mask. Without warning, the mask flew at Izuku, absorbing into the mask on his face. The green-haired teen felt energy spread through his body for a brief moment before disappearing just as fast. What was that? Hero? Are you alright? Morgana exclaimed, he and Ryuji quickly rushing over to Izuku's side to examine him. What the heck was that, Mona? You didn't say anything about that happening. Ryuji complained, looking at the cat in accusation. I don't know. This is the first time I've seen something like that occur. Morgana snapped at the faux blonde before looking back at Izuku in concern. Are you alright? Did it do something to you? I don't know. Izuku admitted, looking down at himself for answers. He didn't feel much different as things were. In fact, he felt completely fine. He couldn't pinpoint any sort of indication that whatever Pixie did had hurt him in any way. In fact, it seemed like she had fused with him in some way. She said she would live in my heart, but that means… crap. Enemies incoming. Ryuji suddenly exclaimed, pulling Izuku's attention back to reality. Looking up, a knight had already melted away into a shadow, the double-horned horse that the three were used to encountering at this point. Death to the enemies of King Kamoshida. It roared out in anger, quickly swinging its horns down and knocking Ryuji into the back wall. Skull. Izuku cried out in fear, watching as the faux blonde grunted in pain. Quickly stepping forward, Izuku took a protective position in front of Mona and Skull, hand reaching up to his mask to summon Carter. Oh, pick me, Master, I want to help. Izuku widened his eyes as he heard a voice in his head. It wasn't Carter this time, though. It was undoubtedly Pixie, the shadow that he had absorbed. So wait, you really are. Hero, watch out. Morgana warned, the green-haired teen snapping his eyes forward to see the shadow charging him. Izuku grimaced, quickly diving out of its path for fear of being gored through by the beast. Don't lose focus in battle. Why yeah, sorry. Izuku muttered, gulping as he tried to figure out how to explain what was going on in his mind right now. Or heart, he supposed. Summon her forth, kid. Realize the power that you possess. This time it was Carter who spoke, Izuku's eyes widening as he heard his persona. Gulping, Izuku reached toward his mask and obeyed. Focus on her name and image, bring her forward to do battle. Pixie. Izuku cried out, pulling the mask from his face. It then erupted in blue flame, Morgana and Ryuji, widening their eyes in shock as the shadow they had previously defeated, sprang from the flames. Pixie greeted, blowing a kiss to no one in general, as she faced off against the shadow ahead of them. Wait, what? Ain't that the shadow from before? Ryuji blanched in utter shock, pushing off the wall as he looked to Morgana for answers. It is. Were you able to absorb the shadow's powers and image and make a persona from it? Morgana asked, no less confused than Ryuji at the moment. Pixie, strike. Izuku cried out, ignoring his friends for a moment as he focused on the shadow. Like with Carter, he immediately knew what powers Pixie possessed and was able to lash out on instinct. As the horse charged at him again, Pixie raised its arms and unleashed a bolt of electricity from its palms. The bicorn cried out in pain, the attack enough to stop its charge. Skull, now. Huh? Oh right. Ryuji quickly readied himself, pulling his mask off and summoning Captain Kid forward. Tear him to pieces. He cried out, the persona rearing its boat at the bottom and smashing the mast into the shadow's back and crushing it. The beast let out a blood-curdling scream before exploding into a mess of black ooze, melting away before the three. Izuku took a deep breath before placing his mask back on his face, Pixie fading from existence and giving him a wink. Looking back at his friends, Ryuji and Morgana quickly rushed back up to Izuku, both with looks of awe across their face. Dude, that was insane. I didn't know you could have more than one. Ryuji said, turning to Morgana in question. Why didn't you say anything about it? This is news to me, too. Morgana retorted, glancing up at Izuku in wonder. As it normally goes, people with the potential for personas should only have one as each person only has one heart. But it looks like Hiro is capable of having multiple. So I can have a persona outside of Carter. Izuku muttered in thought, pulling off his mask without summoning a persona. Memories started to flood back, realization crossing his features as his mind drifted back to his previous talk with the occupants of the Velvet Room. Personas are the strength of heart. With the formation of bonds, your personas will also grow with them. Dustine's words echoed in his ears. So that's what she meant. I really can have more than just Carter as my persona. This could really help us out. Pixie isn't that strong compared to Carter, but she still possesses powers that he doesn't have. And the more personas you are able to gather from shadows, the more weaknesses you can exploit. Morgana concluded, a large grin spreading across his lips. This is incredible. This will give us the edge we need when coming against so many different enemies. Oh man, seriously, hell yeah. Ryuji laughed, slapping Izuku's shoulder. We're gonna have to keep doing this, then. We'll hold up everyone we can. Right. I'll do my best to take advantage, too. Izuku nodded in agreement, giving them both a smile before it slightly faltered. Wait, does this mean I have to negotiate with all of them? Morgana tilted his head in thought before humming out an answer. Probably. That shadow didn't absorb into your mask until after you were able to find some sort of common ground. It's probably going to be up to you when it comes to gaining new personas that way. So whenever we get the chance, we're definitely going to have to work on your negotiation skills. Why yeah, Izuku muttered dejectedly, scratching his hair in defeat. Still, I can't believe you have such an amazing ability. I got pretty lucky when I met you too, it seems. Morgana laughed, eyes sparkling in amazement. I'll make sure your power doesn't get wasted. We'll get you the best personas possible. Now, with that said, let's get moving. Seeing no reason to argue, Izuku and Ryuji went back into action, the trio moving on to the next hallway. Peering down, Izuku saw two doorways ahead of them, eyes dancing between them. A sudden shimmer in the farthest door pulsed, Izuku realizing what that meant. Mona, the end hallway door is a safe room, I think. Izuku informed, Morgana raising a brow before nodding. Gotcha. If you guys want, we can take a quick rest or keep going. Morgana asked, glancing at Izuku and Ryuji. Before either could answer, though, footsteps and voices echoed from the doorway they just exited through. Shit, more are coming. Ryuji grunted quietly, glancing at his partners in question. What are we gonna do, then? Let's head to the safe room. We don't need unnecessary fights. Izuku suggested, Morgana and Ryuji nodding in agreement. They quickly made their way to the safe room, making sure to lock the door as they entered, but staying close to listen in on the soldiers. They wanted to make sure that none were left when they departed the safe room, and the underlying fear that Mona might have been wrong when it comes to whether or not a shadow would enter this room. Thankfully, it could be heard that the soldiers were going through the next door, Izuku and Ryuji breathing out in relief. Damn. I might have underestimated just how many of those guys are actually running around. Ryuji admitted, scratching his head in annoyance. We've already fought a few, already. How many more do we gotta get through? I'd prepare myself for a long day of fighting if I were you, Skull. Morgana said, glancing back at the faux blonde with a somewhat sympathetic look. We've barely made it through a few rooms as is. We've still got a lot of ground to cover before we can even establish an infiltration route. Yeah. Going through all of this now, I'm kind of surprised you tried doing this alone. Izuku hummed, looking down at Morgana in thought. We've at least had numbers advantage, but imagining it alone doesn't sound very easy. I'll admit, it wasn't the greatest idea. Morgana sighed, looking away from the two in shame. But I didn't really have a choice. I wanted to regain my memories, and the only clue I have is that it's linked to palaces. I couldn't wait around and expect to find strangers who happen to have the same ability as me, after all. Still, I'm glad things worked out this way rather than having to tackle it on my own over and over again. Speaking of which, I've been meaning to ask. Ryuji spoke up, turning to the cat in question. You say you lost your memory and crap, but you know all about these palaces. How does that work? In some cases, people can lose memory of who they are, but still remember basic information like going to the bathroom or how to eat. Izuku spoke up surprisingly, tilting his head down as he held his chin. The amount of information lost varies from person to person depending on how severe, but it's still possible to retain certain memories even after you lose memory of who you are. Oh, really? Damn, Ryuji muttered, rubbing his head awkwardly. See? So stop being a moron and accept what I've told you so far. Morgana triumphantly grinned, turning to Izuku with appreciation. Thank you, hero. You really make Skull look pretty dumb with your insight. Oh, put a sock in it, cat. Ryuji snapped in annoyance. You talk big, but you could still end up just being some house cat. You don't even know if you really are human. I have to be human. There's no doubt about it. Morgana retorted, sending a weak glare Ryuji's way. Despite his words, his gaze somewhat faltered as he looked away. I have to be. Izuku opened his mouth to speak again, but hesitated when he heard footsteps outside the door. Holding a finger to his mouth, Izuku motioned to the door to alert the others of the guards. What was the princess doing outside the castle? The three heard, the trio suddenly becoming more interested and standing closer to the door. She normally never leaves King Kamoshida's chamber unless he calls her out. Princess? Ryuji repeated in question, Izuku peering back at him. That imitation of Takamaki-senpai, I think Izuku guessed, remembering when the cognitive creation from days before. Quite. Morgana urged them, leaning his ear against the door. It was rather strange. We only found her because we thought we were following the signal of an intruder. They heard again, Morgana furrowing his brow in confusion before looking back at the two. I better check this out. You two stay here. Morgana suggested, cracking open the door and slipping out before either could protest. What do you think that's about? Ryuji asked, earning a small shrug from Izuku in response. We put Takamaki-senpai back in the real world, so there should be no way they're talking about her, right? Izuku suggested with a hopeful smile. I wouldn't put too much stock in that idea. Morgana quickly spoke as he sped back through the door, a sense of panic in his voice. It looks like Lady Anne was captured by the shadows. Izuku and Ryuji both stared wide-eyed at the cat, looking at one another in alert. But how? We made sure to put her back in our world and everything. That doesn't make sense. She would have to have the app. But Skull and I are the only ones who have it, Izuku muttered before realization crossed his expression. That is, unless the moment she came to this world, the app appeared on her phone, too. Ryuji bit his bottom lip, realizing what that meant. Shit, so that's how it works, damn it. The whole point of kicking her out was to make sure that she'd be safe. We don't have much time to think about it. Let's go before something bad happens to her. Izuku quickly advised, Morgana and Ryuji briefly hesitating before nodding in agreement, quickly following behind as he took the lead. Let me go, you bastards. Anne complained, struggling in the hands of her captors. The knight simply ignored her, dragging the twin-tailed blonde through a long room. On the ground surrounding her, pink silhouettes of girls giggled carelessly. Anne had no idea what they were, but noticed the fact that they wore Shujin's PE shirts. Instead of the sweatpants, though, they wore legless Spanx. What are these things? This doesn't make any sense at all. Glancing forward, Anne realized they were dragging her to some kind of strange restraint, a large brass X at the end of the room, right in front of a picture of Kamoshida. What the hell? Place her arms in the restraints. One of the knights said, paying her little mind as they got closer to the strange object. Why, you bastards? I'm not just going to take this. Anne cried out as she wiggled more. Baring her teeth, Anne decided it was time to put her quirk into action. She quickly lurched forward at the arm of the knight restraining her left side, teeth sinking deep into the armor. Ah! The guard cried out in pain, releasing her arm from its grasp. It had been a while since Anne had bitten into metal so hard, breaking off the chunk that she was able to catch in her mouth and spitting it out. I told you to let me go, asshole. Anne growled in anger, glaring up at the knight before her eyes trailed down to his arm. Her eyes went wide, seeing that a strange black ooze seemed to drip from his arm rather than blood. What the hell is Enough out of you? The other guard suddenly hit her in the back with its shield, causing Anne to fall to her knees in pain. There's no way such a vulgar wench is our princess. It proclaimed, reaching back down and grabbing her arm again. The other guard seemed to do the same, ignoring the missing piece of its body and continuing forward with Anne in hand. They raised her arms up and pinned her against the cross, binding her hands. You bastards. What the hell is going on? Anne cried out, struggling weakly against her binds. The hit against her back took the air out of her and still throbbed with pain. You really think the cops or heroes are going to let you get away with this? No one's coming for you, girl. Not like anyone could stop me, anyways. A familiar voice sneered, Anne's eyes snapping open as she looked to her left. Standing there was Kamoshida, though in very strange apparel compared to what she'd ever seen him in, or anyone for that matter. Kamoshida? Anne blinked in question before grinding her teeth and struggling. What the hell is going on? Let me down. I can't believe you confused this wench with my dear princess. Kamoshida scoffed, crossing his arms over his bare chest. She's far too noisy. Isn't that right, my dear? Anne followed his gaze and stiffened, watching as someone with her exact image walked up next to him, only different in clothes, as she wore a skin-tight purple leopard print bikini and cat ears. What the hell, who is that, and why does she look like me? I don't know what you're talking about. A noisy, disobedient brat like you is nothing compared to my sweet Anne-chan. Kamoshida scoffed, raising an arm and wrapping it around the half-naked girl. I don't care about that. Tell me what's going on. What is this place? Anne screamed louder, tears of frustration threatening at the edge of her eyes. Did you do something to the school? Quite the chatterbox, aren't you? You should understand better the situation that you're in. Kamoshida chuckled, looking at his guards. One held a sword higher to Anne's body, the twin-tailed blonde gasping in fear. There we go. That's a much better look on your face, now. What are you doing? Stop, Anne muttered, biting her bottom lip in fear. Why are you doing this? Have you gone insane? This is my world. My castle. I can do as I please here. Kamoshida sneered, grinning darkly up at Anne. And do whatever I wish to whomever I like. This is messed up. Did you bring me to some shady part of town? Anne continued to struggle, her confusion only growing by the second. Hurry up and let me down before I really get pissed off, Kamoshida. You sure do love to mouth off. That's a rather big offense to me and my castle. Kamoshida smirked before turning back to the imagined version of Anne. What do you think, princess? No one talks like that to the king. That's, totally unforgivable. The figment giggled out dumbly, her voice a loose and dumb version of Anne's own speech. You're exactly right. Trash that talks like that to me have to be punished. Kamoshida grinned again, turning back to the real Anne and chuckling. I guess we'll have to execute you, then. Anne felt her heart sink at that, eyes widening in horror as a golden armored knight approached her. It held the sword up to her neck, Anne reflexively turning her head away from it in fear. Why, you can't be serious, there's no way. What the hell is wrong with you? Nothing is wrong with me. You're in my castle, after all. Kamoshida cackled out, holding his chin in mock thought. Now, what to do with you? Shall I have them cut you up into little pieces? Or maybe just take off your clothes and enjoy myself first? This is sick. Stop it. Anne visibly trembled, fear starting to overcome her entire body. She wanted to scream for help, to beg him to let her go. All the questions and confusion had mounted in her mind, but right now that was the least of her concerns. With the way that Kamoshida was staring at her, she didn't doubt that he would act on his threats. It must be pretty terrifying to feel so helpless, huh? Kamoshida sneered, taking a step closer, examining Anne closely. I wonder if that girl felt the same way. What was her name again? Well, the one who tried to kill herself. The one you so valiantly tried to help by dating me. Anne felt her body freeze entirely, looking up at Kamoshida in disbelief. Shiho. Yes, that's it. That stupid girl. Kamoshida nodded, snapping his fingers. It's your fault she did that, by the way. Anne's stomach immediately plummeted. What? Had you just slept with me, none of that would have happened, you know. Kamoshida antagonized further, slowly reaching a hand out and taking her chin in his grasp. But since you decided to say no, I let her act as your replacement. It was pretty nice, too. Anne felt her entire being shake, her fear swirling with a mountain of other emotions. Among them, anger surfaced. You bastard. Don't act too cocky, now. Kamoshida warned her with a smirk, the golden knight suddenly reminding Anne of her place as it held the sword closer to her neck. Anne's body froze again, anger soon replaced by fear once again. Now that's better. Don't forget what situation you're in right now. Now then, how about we start where I left off with the other girl? After all, I just gave her body a quick feel. It's a shame she jumped. I was just about ready to take the rest of her body. No, Shiho, Anne muttered, tears starting to spill from her eyes. Her best friend, whom she'd been trying to protect, had ended up being hurt by Kamoshida. All because of her weakness. Because she couldn't handle putting up with Kamoshida anymore. I'm so sorry, I had no idea he would go so far, she confessed, body starting to slack, now only being held up by her restraints. I'm so sorry. There we go. That's the look I want to see. Kamoshida laughed, rubbing his chin in excitement. Now then, men. Cut off her clothes. It's time that she made it up to her dear friend for her mistake. OMG. You're such a perv. The imitation of Anne giggled dumbly, mounting his left shoulder as she watched alongside him. Anne didn't bother to resist anymore. In her mind, Anne deserved anything she would get at this point. She had let her friend down. Let Shiho suffer at his hands because of her selfishness. I should have known better, I should have just slept with him and kept Shiho safe. The tears continued to fall from her eyes, the twin-tailed blonde hanging loosely from the restraints in resignation. Shiho, I'm sorry. Don't listen to him, Anne. Hearing her name called out by a familiar voice, Anne snapped her head up just in time to catch sight of Ryuji now slamming his shoulder into one of the grey armored knights at her left. Sakamoto. She cried out in shock. The faux blonde cringed in pain from the overexertion of his quirk. Mona called out, a green aura covering Ryuji to help the stress from his attack. You intruder scum. The other grey knight growled, raising its sword to attack. Much to his and Anne's surprise, Ryuji spun around with a shotgun in hand, blasting a round of cognitive buckshot into its chest to knock it back. The Golden Knight stepped forward this time, preparing to take a swing at Ryuji as well. Bang bang bang. 3 successive shots rang through the air, bullets whizzing through the air and into the back of the golden armored guard. Anne watched as it fell forward on its face, eyes wide as she quickly looked up to the source. Izuku and Morgana stood there, pistol and slingshot raised and aimed forward. Midoriya-kun. Don't listen to him, Takamaki-senpai, Izuku said, repeating the words that Ryuji had spoken first. Looking at him now, gone was the meek and gentle expression that she had associated with Izuku, now replaced by a firm, determined face. Izuku's brow furrowed in anger, and his teeth gritted together. He quickly shifted his aim to Kamoshida, the king staring at him in bemusement. Don't listen to anything he says about you or Suzui-senpai. DCH. You brats again. You just don't know when to quit. Kamoshida scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest, while the cognitive version of Anne clung to him closely. Is getting expelled not enough for you too? Pan it, asshole. Before we fill you full of lead. Ryuji snapped, quickly aiming his gun up at the king. Skull, quick. Get Takamaki down from there. Izuku ordered, the faux blonde hesitating for a moment before quickly nodding, the green-haired teen keeping an eye on Kamoshida's shadow. Takamaki-senpai, don't blame yourself for what he did to Suzui-senpai. Anne heard his words, but looked at him with reluctance. But it's my fault that. Kamoshida's the monster who did that to her. Izuku cut her off quickly, his voice doing little to hide his own rage. Despite his anger, Izuku kept from taking any shots at Kamoshida. Both because of the effect it would have on the real Kamoshida and his own moral code. Even now, he doubted he'd be willing to shoot him straight out. But that didn't mean he was any less pissed. Don't think for a second it's in any way your fault. He's the one that hurt Suzui-senpai. So don't put that weight on your shoulders. Hiro Morgana muttered in awe, taking his eyes off of Kamoshida for a moment to look at him from the side. Anne was silent, soaking in his words slowly. She had let Kamoshida convince her that it had been her fault. That it was because of her that Shiho was hurt by the perverted teacher. That Shiho jumped because of her resistance. But should she really be focusing on herself? After all, Kamoshida was the scum who put her best friend through that. Speaking of the coach, Kamoshida suddenly started to cackle tauntingly. Don't hold that gun up all high and mighty like you have any power. Just like that girl, the rest of you are nothing but stones for me to step all over. To be played with all for my amusement. He sneered, eyes shifting over to his knights. You son of a bitch, Ryuji growled, still struggling to remove the binds on Anne's hands. Guards. Get off your asses and kill the intruders. If you let any of them escape, you'll be the next ones to be executed. Kamoshida ordered loudly, pointing to the golden armored knight specifically. The 3 phantom thieves widened their eyes as the shadows suddenly started to move, pushing off the ground and standing at full length. What the hell, I thought we finished him off. Ryuji blanched, quickly taking a defensive stance in front of Anne as the guards started to shake in their armor. Without another word, their armor collapsed onto the ground, a black ooze spreading across it and forming. The gray armored shadows became the familiar bicorns from before, but the golden armored shadow became something entirely different. Floating in the middle of a room was a large purple figure, resembling a goblin from fantasy novels and stories. Oddly enough, it was sitting on a toilet without care, apparently something that was part of his being. Crap. Skull surrounded. Morgana cursed, eyes wide as he looked at Izuku. Don't let them attack Scholar Takamaki-senpai. Izuku cried out, stowing his gun away and rushing forward with the cat, hand raised to his mask as he got ready to call upon his persona. You all will die for Kamoshida. The largest shadow boomed, turning its attention to Ryuji and Anne, the faux blonde making sure to keep Anne directly behind him. Damn it, just give me a sec, Takamaki. I've got a Persona 5 Ost. Awakening. He's right. Ryuji hesitated for a moment, glancing back at Anne in question. The twin-tailed blonde weakly laughed, shaking her head in shame. How could I let that asshole toy with me? I'm such an idiot. This is all his fault. Everything Shiho suffered and has been through, this son of a bitch is all to blame. And I'm not going to take his shit anymore. It has certainly been far too long. Anne suddenly felt a splitting headache crack at her skull, the blonde gasping in shock. The binds kept her from gripping at her head, only making the pain feel more severe. Tell me who is going to avenge her if you don't. The more the voice spoke, the more severe the pain became, Anne's entire body writhing to break free from her restraints. Forgiving him was never an option. Takamaki. Are you alright? Ryuji asked in fear, her sudden convulsion surprising him, but seeming very familiar. Such is the scream of the other you that dwells within. Takamaki-senpai, she has one as well, Izuku muttered in realization, eyes widening as he watched Anne continue to struggle. I am thou art I. Anne let out a scream of sheer agony, her entire body tensing up before falling limp against the binds. We can finally forge a contract. "I hear you, Carmen," Anne suddenly muttered. Blue flame swirled above her head before gathering around her brow. Anne snapped her head up, a candy red mask now on her face. It was outlined with two sharp cat ears at each edge of the top, as well as a small pointed nose at the front. "I am done holding myself back. I'll unleash everything I have." "There you go. Nothing can be solved by restraining yourself. Understand?" Anne, in a surprising burst of strength, ripped her wrists from the cuffs, pulling them out of the post one by one before reaching up to the mask on her face. She felt a small resistance as it stuck to her skin, but didn't hesitate to rip it off with a quick jerk. Blood seeped down her brow as she let out a cry of pain. Blue flames suddenly erupted around her. "Then I'll gladly lend you my strength." At the center of the flames, Anne revealed herself with a figure towering over her. Anne's outfit had completely transformed, shifting to a skin-tight red leather bodysuit. Her chest was exposed at the top, pink gloves on her hands and high heels on her feet. Zippers ran up and down her outfit and a long leather cattail bounced from the top of her butt. Standing tall behind her was Anne's persona. It was female in figure, wearing a long wavy black and red dress that was revealing at the chest, her breasts large. She had twin drills in her hair and wore a similar cat mask to Anne, though it was black with pink highlights. In her hand was a thin wire, a black-suited man with a hard head waving at one end, the other end connected to a similar shaped figure that Carmen stepped on like a dominatrix. Anne glared up at the shadows, Ryuji having taken a step back from the twin-tailed blonde in awe. Before anyone could make a move, Anne quickly turned a glare toward Kamoshida and the copy of her. Raising a hand, she pointed at the cognitive manifestation. "Burn it to ash." "Carmen." Raising its free hand, Carmen let a ball of fire form in its palm before lashing it forward. Kamoshida quickly jumped away from the fake Anne, watching as it went up in flames before his eyes. Izuku and Morgana watched in bewilderment, shifting their gaze back to Anne as she strode forward. "I'm done letting you toy with me." Anne growled, eyes glaring directly at Kamoshida before shifting to the shadows guarding him. "You've hurt Shiho in ways beyond belief. You've taken everything from her. So now, I'm going to burn down everything that you hold value in, Kamoshida." "You insolent brat," the largest shadow growled, baring its teeth in anger. "How dare you threaten His Majesty?" "I'm not making idle threats here. This is a promise I plan to keep." Anne snapped back, crouching forward as if preparing to lunge at her enemies. "Now let's go, Carmen." Chapter 11. Izuku stared in awe as Anne unleashed torrents of flame from her persona. Questions began to fill his mind. Had Anne always had the potential to summon one? Did coming to this world grant anyone with the capability to summon a persona? The conditions were still fuzzy for Izuku, but his thoughts returned to Morgana's words. Someone with a strong will of rebellion could possess a persona. Perhaps they could figure out the exact meaning of this in the future. Though now was hardly the time. "Hero, let's back her up," Morgana called out, bringing Izuku back to earth. "Alright." Izuku nodded, eyes focusing on the biggest enemy. Skull. "Take out the smaller shadows. Mona, let's focus on the big one with Takamaki-senpai." "Got it." Ryuji and Morgana said, the three rushing forward to take on their targets. The shadows that aided the toilet-seated goblin were nothing more than bicorns, something that wasn't a real threat for any of the persona users at this point. Ryuji reached for his mask and cast it aside, Captain Kidd hovering above him. "Let's tear him apart." Ryuji exclaimed, his persona raising the cannon of an arm and unleashing a blast of electricity. The bicorns kicked off the ground and dodged, hoping to take Ryuji off guard as they charged at him. "Ha, don't think it'll be that easy." Ryuji smirked, grabbing the pipe from his back. As one of the bicorn approached, the faux blonde raised his weapon like a batter, getting ready to knock a baseball out of the park. "Come on, asshole, just a little more," Ryuji muttered, eyes darting between both of his enemies to see who would be on him first. When Ryuji had a clear shot, he grinned before swinging with all of his might, knocking the bicorn square in the temple. It cried out in pain as its head swung to its right, the bicorn's horn now stabbing into the other shadow. "Hell yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Now Captain Kidd, blast him." Ryuji roared. With its targets confused and injured, the persona's targets had no room to escape as a volley of lightning shot from its cannon, their weakness exploited and immediately destroying the shadows. Meanwhile, Izuku and Morgana rushed up with their masks pulled, both immediately hoping to take the large shadow off guard with their own attacks. "Go, Carter. Slice him up, Zoro." Zoro unleashed a torrent of wind while Carter threw a ball of light at the goblin. The shadow bucked forward somewhat from the attacks, but slowly craned its gaze back toward the two, causing Hiro and Mona to widen their eyes in surprise. With a roar, it spun around in the air and swung a large arm at them, Morgana and Izuku barely able to pull up their arms to guard the attack. The two were sent sprawling back on the ground, Izuku cringing in pain as he tried to sit up. I don't understand, our attacks barely did anything. Are we that weak by comparison?" Izuku asked, grabbing his staff and using it to help himself to his feet. Not quite, it seems that our enemy is resistant to both of our attacks. Morgana declared, groaning as he pushed up to his feet. While our enemies have weaknesses, they also have resistances. This one's definitely going to be trouble if we can't land any decent hits. All who oppose Kamoshida will be crushed. The shadow roared, turning its full attention to the two. Hey. I'm not done with you, asshole. Anne growled, Carmen hovering behind her and forming flames in its grasp. I'm not going to let anyone who'd cover for that prick get away, either. With a cry of rage, Anne's persona sent a volley of flames at the back of the shadow, this time the attack doing a wealth of damage. It cried out in pain from the blast, eyes rolling back as the goblin tried to reach toward the burn. I got through. Her attack was effective. Izuku pointed out, eyes widening in shock. It looks like fire attacks are most effective against this shadow. But now's a good opportunity. Let's give it hell. Morgana exclaimed, pulling the scimitar blade from his waist. Following suit, Izuku pulled the staff up, the two rushing forward with their weapons raised, before slamming them into the shadow as hard as they could. Anne followed their example, a whip now appearing in her hand that she lashed out with. The shadow cried out in agony, flailing its arms wildly in hopes of knocking the three off of him. Izuku, Morgana and Anne gained some more distance, the ogre growling in anger. You filthy peasants. You will not shame this castle with your presence. A bolt of electricity slammed into its side, the shadow growling in annoyance before shaking it off without much problem, eyes turning to Ryuji. Like we give a shit about what you think, asshole. The faux blonde snapped, pulling out his model shotgun and taking aim. Hey. Takamaki. Help me waste him. You don't have to tell me twice. Anne proclaimed, Carmen now hovering above her again. Carmen, burn him to cinders. You think I'd let you do that again? The shadow roared, raising an arm to strike out at Anne with. Boom. Its hand was suddenly pelted with buckshot, Ryuji being the first to cover Anne for her attack. You meddlesome. Before it could even react, Morgana and Izuku followed suit, both firing off several rounds into its back, causing it to tense from the pain. Anne didn't waste her chance, willing her persona forward and commanding it to set him ablaze. Turn him to ash. Agi. Carmen let flames swirl in her palms, rearing back before blasting a wave into the shadow. It cried out in miserable agony, the damage enough to knock it off its porcelain throne and fall face flat on the ground, the miserable monster turning into black ooze. A golden set of armor became visible from the center, but was completely empty of its owner. Anne huffed heavily for breath, sweat trailing down her brow as her eyes shifted around the room. They landed on Shadow Kamoshida, the king scrambling away from them and toward the front door. Where do you think you're going? Anne growled, taking a step forward. Like a brick wall though, exhaustion suddenly hit her, the twin-tailed blonde hunching over and leaning on her knees. Why you rats, you won't get away with this. Kamoshida cried out defiantly, though fear was apparent in his voice and expression. Just wait until the rest of my guards get here. Then you're all dead. He barked before quickly swinging the door open and rushing out. Get back here. Anne cried out, wanting to pursue him further. A hand wrapped around her arm, Anne immediately snapping her head around anxiously before realizing it was Ryuji. Hey, calm down. You're in no shape to chase that asshole. Ryuji pointed out, supporting her weight. But seriously, why the hell did you come back? We pushed you out so that you wouldn't be in danger. Hey, do you talk to all women like that? Morgana said, shooting an accusatory glance at Ryuji before shifting his attention back to Anne, eyes filled with worry. Are you alright, Lady Anne? Lady Anne. The twin-tailed blonde repeated in question, shifting her gaze up to Morgana. He's right, Takamaki-senpai. We didn't want you to get involved like this, Izuku said this time, going to Anne's other side to help her up. Anne looked between Ryuji and Izuku before her eyes trailed down to her outfit. Her cheeks immediately turned red with embarrassment, wrestling her arms away from the two and feebly attempting to cover herself from view. What the hell am I wearing? What the hell is going on? Izuku and Ryuji recoiled in surprise, the faux blonde scratching his head sheepishly. Crap. Looks like she snapped back to reality. Lady Anne, please calm down. I know this is really difficult to take in, but Morgana started, hoping to ease her mind, but failing as Anne used him to push herself up to stand. You guys really need to start explaining. What is this place? Anne demanded, eyes darting back to Izuku and Ryuji. The faux blonde gulped in fear while Izuku couldn't help but take another step back, intimidated by the twin-tailed blonde. Well, you see, Izuku tried to start, his words shaky as he spoke. Shaking his head, Izuku remembered the words of Kamoshida's shadow, brow furrowing seriously. We don't have time to go over that now. We have to get going before more shadows show up. He's right. Please lean on me if you need to, Lady Anne. Morgana offered, Ryuji rolling his eyes at the cat's attempt at being suave. I mean, I wouldn't mind the help, but you're a little too short to lean on. Anne pointed out honestly, Morgana's ears drooping dejectedly in response. But I. Alright, just put a sock in it. I'll help her out. Ryuji huffed irritably, offering a hand to Anne for her to take. We don't got time to waste. We need to get going. I think I'm okay, for now. I'm tired but not enough to not move on my own. Anne shook her head, standing up straight to walk on her own. Skull, stay by her side in case Takamaki-senpai gets too tired. Izuku suggested, the faux blonde nodding in agreement. We can try for the treasure again, later. Right now we need to get Takamaki-senpai out of here. Treasure? What are you talking about? Anne blinked in confusion, a small huff escaping Ryuji. There really ain't much time to talk about it right now. Wait till we get out of here. Ryuji said, the twin-tailed blonde biting her lip in reluctance. Taking into consideration the danger and her current exhaustion, Anne sighed and decided not to argue, nodding in acceptance. Okay. Let's go. The others nodded, Izuku deciding to take the lead and sprinting ahead. He slowly pushed the door open, making sure the hallway leading to their current room was clear. Seeing that it was currently unoccupied, Izuku pushed it open, waving for his friends to quickly follow. The four started to dash as fast as they could, Ryuji keeping pace with Anne in case it was too much. Kamishita said they were this way. Izuku widened his eyes as he skidded to a halt, holding his arms out to stop the others from running forward. Damn it, they're cutting us off from the exit. Izuku muttered, eyes darting around for options. Seeing a door to their left, Izuku didn't waste time, quickly swinging it open. Peeking inside, he saw no shadows within the room. This way, hurry. Izuku ordered in a more hushed voice, though with an equal amount of urgency. The three didn't question him, quickly following his instructions and going in the room. Izuku quickly shut the door, looking around the room for their options. This isn't a safe room, hero. They can come in here whenever they want. Morgana reminded him, Izuku gulped, nodding in. Understanding. It's likely that expecting them to walk by without checking here would be a fool's hope. We need to get ready to fight, Izuku muttered, tilting his head down and holding his chin in thought. We can take a few shadows, no sweat. Let him try. Ryuji shrugged, smashing his fist into his other hand confidently. We don't want to have to fight every single shadow. Takamaki-senpai is tired and we want to have enough energy for getting to the exit. Izuku suggested, sweat beginning to trail down his brow. We might not have a choice right now, but I'd like for us to use the least amount of our stamina as possible, but how? He began to mumble, eyes darting around the room. It looked a bit different than the rest of the rooms they had gone through so far. The walls weren't painted or papered over, dark maroon brick exposed. Standing against a brick were tall wooden shelves with keg barrels, each likely holding a large amount of alcohol dreamed up by Hikognition. We could try to hold our ground like Ryuji-senpai suggested. In this small room, their numbers would be pretty limited. But still, if we get more like the golden armored captain, that might take a lot of stamina out of us. Even so, conflict is unavoidable at this point. Think, Izuku. Mumbled aloud as he ground his teeth in frustration, looking back up to consider. His eyes landed back at the shelves, a light bulb suddenly turned on in his head and a small smile spreading across his lips. I think I've got something. He looked up at his three companions, blinking as he realized they were now staring. Was I? Yep. Ryuji and Morgana immediately answered, the green-haired teen flustering up immediately. Do you do that a lot? Anne couldn't help but ask. He does. Morgana said, Izuku's shoulders slumping at being thrown under the bus. But forget that for a second. What did you have in mind, hero? The guards busted through the door, 4 gray armored knights marching inside with a golden knight at the back. Despite no immediate view of their targets, the room was large enough that the guards didn't immediately dismiss it, the guards spreading out. Make sure to check every barrel and wardrobe. Those rats could be slinking around anywhere. The Major Shadow commanded, the others obeying without hesitation. Stalking over to wooden shelves, the gray armored guards lifted their swords, preparing to cut through the kegs. Now. Before the shadows could stop it, the shelves were suddenly shoved forward, barrels of alcohol busting open as they fell like a wave on top of the guards. On the other side, Ryuji and Morgana stood there, their personas floating behind them, wicked grins on their faces. You vermin. The golden guard growled, taking a step forward before the shelf to his left fell on top of him, Anne and Midoriya standing just behind it. It worked. Anne cheered, grinning ear to ear at their success. Hurry, Takamaki-senpai. Set them on fire. Izuku reminded the twin-tailed blonde, Anne pausing in her celebration before quickly nodding. Alright. Carmen, come forth. Anne exclaimed, pulling her mask from her face and summoning her persona. Agi. With swirling flames in hand, Carmen lashed out her attack. Fire erupted from the pile of wood and metal, the guards now crying out in pain. Black ooze erupted from their masks and rose up, but the flames persisted in spite of this. Well, what's going on? I wasn't sure if it would work here because it's only a cognition, but it looks like it worked out. Izuku breathed in relief, wiping his forehead of sweat and taking a step back from the flames. The alcoholic content of the liquor was really high, after all. With enough alcohol, the flames will keep burning even after they emerge. Why you bastard DS? A shadow cried out from the burning pile, weakly attempting to push the wood off of its under, and the fire too intense to fight against. The shadows weren't given the chance to fight back as they were soon reduced to ooze, dissipating into thin air. The four quickly regrouped at the door, eyes lingering on the burning pile with looks of satisfaction. Not bad there, hero. That was some nice thinking. Ryuji chuckled, slapping Izuku's back in praise. I honestly hadn't thought of such a roundabout way of tackling our enemies. You just keep on surprising us, huh? Morgana said, offering an impressed smile as he crossed his paws. We barely had to do anything. Good job. Anne said, grinning down at the younger teen in approval. I still barely understand what's going on, but it worked. It was nothing, really any of you would have thought of it, Izuku bashfully muttered, face reddening from their praise. Shaking his head, he cleared his throat and tried to return to prior urgency. Anyway, we should get going before more show up. Receiving nods of approval from the three, Izuku led the way again toward their escape route. Izuku stood mutely by Anne as they waited for Ryuji to return from grabbing drinks. After making their escape from the castle, the four headed to the train station before taking a break. With time now to spare, Izuku and the others finally opened up to Anne about everything regarding Kamoshida and the other world. Anne absorbed the information silently, her sense of logic likely at war with the experience and evidence that she now had in the cognitive world. Izuku wasn't sure what to say at this point, knowing that it was likely pointless to keep persisting. It would be better to let Anne accept it for herself. Still, Izuku had a bit of concern. It's a lot to take in, huh? Izuku asked, trying to at least give her mind some ease with the distraction of a conversation. Anne had been focused on the ground deep in thought when he spoke, almost jumping at the sound of his voice. Yeah, just a bit. Anne admitted with a sheepish giggle, scratching the back of her head. I feel like I know less than before I went to that world, now. It's okay to take it slow. No one is demanding that you just accept everything right away. It wouldn't be fair to put such expectations on you. Morgana said, his voice gentle and kind as he spoke. Izuku couldn't help but deadpan in silence, remembering that Morgana had acted like he and Ryuji were morons for not being able to understand everything right from the get-go. Thanks, Anne muttered, watching Morgana with eyes of curiosity. I'm sorry, but it's hard to get over that I'm actually talking to a cat. I've seen a couple people with animal parts, but this is pretty different. Yeah, it's pretty strange, huh? Ryuji said, joining the three again with a bottle of soda in each hand. But once you get used to it, it's getting him to shut up, that's the trick. Hey. Morgana hissed in irritation, glaring at Ryuji as he climbed higher on Izuku's shoulder. Oh, can it? Which one you want? Ryuji asked, turning to Anne with the drinks. Whichever isn't carbonated. Anne answers. Ryuji bites his bottom lip, glancing at both drinks. Both are. Sorry. Anne sighed, glancing down at her options before taking the one in his left hand. Thanks. No problem. Here's yours. Ryuji handed the other to Izuku, the green-haired teen taking it with a nod. Hey, where's mine? Morgana whined, glancing at the drinks enviously. Sorry, they didn't have milk. I figured you wouldn't want soda since you're a cat. Ryuji shrugged carelessly, the feline narrowing his eyes in resentment. Anne let out a small giggle, finding the exchange a bit amusing. Have you calmed down now, Lady Anne? Morgana asked sweetly, the twin-tailed blonde nodding in response. Yeah, I'm okay now. I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but I'm at least able to accept everything. Anne explained, turning to Izuku and Morgana. So you're not actually a cat, right? Well, he says that he's human, but I doubt it. Ryuji snorted, earning a small glare from Morgana. Why you? See, come on, guys. Don't start another fight. Izuku said, raising his arms and offering a weak smile. The two opened their mouths to continue, but bit their tongues and relented. Turning back to Anne, Izuku's smile fell into a serious frown. Back to everything we discussed, it looks like you possess a persona like the rest of us now. My persona, Carmen, Anne muttered, looking down as she recalled her fury and power from before. I was able to fight back against Kamoshida thanks to that. It's the will of your rebellion, Lady Anne. A power you can possess in the cognitive world to help you fight. Morgana explained for her, leaning forward on Izuku's shoulder. So then your plan was to change Kamoshida's heart. Which would end up making him confess to all of his crimes. Anne asked, trying to sort through the mountain of information she was now privy to. That's right. No one else is willing to stand up to Kamoshida about what he's done. Ryuji said, brow furrowing in frustration. The parents are turning a blind eye, and that fattest principal isn't willing to stop the school's main source of popularity. Ryuji-senpai and I aren't able to do anything directly, either. Izuku explained, shame coloring his face as he spoke. Everyone just looks at us like we're delinquents and won't listen. This was our only choice left to stop him. Especially after Izuku bit his bottom lip, fighting against the emotions he had been wrestling with ever since the incident. Clutching his fist, Izuku shook his head and looked back up at Anne. We will put a stop to him. Anne saw the raw emotion in his features and heard the conviction in his voice. Narrowing her eyes, Anne nodded in acceptance. Okay, then. Let me help too. Izuku and Ryuji both widened their eyes, taken off guard by her sudden plea, though not entirely surprised. I want to make that bastard pay for what he did to Shiho. He's taken everything away from her. I will never forgive him for it. Wait, time out. Ryuji said, holding a hand up to halt Anne. Look, I know you want to take Kamoshida down as badly as we do, but we were keeping you out so you wouldn't be in danger. We were, but that was because she didn't have a persona. Izuku suddenly remarked, Ryuji blinking in shock as he turned to the timid teen. I normally would be against this, but the more help we can get, the better. Right now, while I might be able to have more than one persona, I can't cover every weakness or resistance that our enemies might have as we push further in. Takamaki-senpai gives us more range of powers to work with. Plus, Takamaki-senpai has as much reason to fight as any of us. Even if we tried to keep her out, I doubt she'd let it stop her anyway. Ryuji took a moment to realize what he meant, slapping a hand against his face. Oh, right. She's got the app too, now. Ryuji sighed, looking back up at Anne. I'm guessing you'd try to go by yourself if we said no. It'd be safer to have you part of the team rather than lone wolfing it. I agree. With Lady Anne, we'd have just enough manpower to tackle this castle now. Morgana said, giving a small grin on his feline face. Ryuji looked between Izuku and Morgana before looking at Anne, the three waiting for his official agreement. With a heavy sigh and a head scratch, he nodded. Fine. Guess there's no help in it now. Then it's decided. I hope we can get along from now on. Anne giggled, giving a more upbeat smile to the three. Looking away from them, her smile fell and determination covered her expression. I'm going to make him pay for it all. For everyone he's hurt, especially Shiho. No one else is going to suffer because of that bastard. Despite Izuku's previous hesitation, the confidence and conviction radiating from Anne put him at ease. He wanted to keep her out of this for her safety. But seeing her strength now, Izuku had no doubt that Anne would be able to lend them a great hand in the troubles to come. When time seemed to slow, Izuku wasn't at all surprised by the following words whispering in his ear. I am thou, thou art I. Thou hast acquired a new vow. It shall become the wings of rebellion. That breaketh thy chains of captivity. But the birth of the lover's persona. I have obtained the winds of blessing. That shall lead to freedom and new power. Izuku still wasn't completely clear on the conditions that were in place when creating these arcanas with others, but smiled at the twin-tailed blonde, regardless as time returned to normal. We'll be counting on you, Takamaki-senpai. He declared, giving his own determined nod. Glad to hear. Just let me know whenever you guys are ready to go. Anne smiled before realization hit her. Oh, we don't have each other's info. Give me your guy's number and email so that we can get in contact real quick. She said, pulling out her phone. Sure, sounds good. Ryuji shrugged, pulling his phone out casually and getting ready to take her number down. Of course. Izuku nodded, pulling his own phone out. It took a moment for him to process, but suddenly his entire body froze. All save for his hands, which now trembled heavily with his phone at the center. His face suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree, eyes wide as plates as he stared at the phone in his palm. Izuku. Morgana said, poking the obviously extremely skittish teen in the cheek, though he didn't seem to notice. Is he okay? Anne asked, blinking obliviously as she watched Izuku's hand shake almost uncontrollably. Why, you're just giving a girl your number and getting hers for a case. Think of it like getting Kodo-sen's number. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Izuku repeated to himself, miserably attempting to calm himself down. Due to this high level of concentration, he remained completely ignorant of the world around him. Oh, he gets pretty nervous around others. Though I think it gets worse around girls, Ryuji hummed, realizing that Izuku was still lost in his own world at the moment before turning to Anne. Don't mind him. I'll give you his number and other stuff so that he doesn't overload. Poor guy. It really does make me wonder how a guy like him got slapped with an assault charge, though. Anne said, offering a small smile of sympathy. He held up pretty well until now. Guess the whole number exchange is getting to him. Ryuji chuckled. He must be pretty close with Najima-senpai, since he doesn't seem to mind her. Najima. Like Makoto Najima, the student council president. Anne repeated, blinking in question. He's close with her. I guess so. Apparently they knew each other from way back. Ryuji elaborated, though a slightly scornful look crossed her expression. Are you sure we can trust her? I heard she's a huge suck-up to teachers. Anne asked, her voice hiding little venom. This seemed to bring Izuku back to reality, the timid teen's eyes slightly widening as he looked up at Anne. Rumor has it that she's well aware of the abuse, too. That's not true. Izuku suddenly spoke, the volume of his voice a little louder than he intended. Anne was caught off guard, not expecting him to answer with such energy. Readjusting himself, Izuku made sure to lower his voice. Sorry, it's just Kodo-san wasn't aware of any of it. When I told her what was going on, Kodo-san did what she could to help us. It's true. Izuku brought her in on it since we thought we could use the help. Najima-senpai isn't half bad. Ryuji added, stuffing his hands into his pockets. Considering both Izuku's trust in her and the information she provided to us about the principal, we did consider for a moment asking her to join us in our assault on the castle. Morgana said, glancing to the side at Izuku. Of course Izuku here didn't want to put her in danger like that and said no. Anne felt a bit of guilt fill her, scratching her head sheepishly. Oh, I see. Sorry for jumping to conclusions, then. It's hard to know who to trust at that school anymore. It's fine. It's been tough on everyone. Izuku nodded, guilt coloring his own face as he thought back to when he left her behind to spill his anger out to Kamoshida. I should see if she's okay, though. I got so caught up in everything that I forgot how we left her earlier. Oh, crap. You're right. Ryuji sighed, kicking at the ground with a bit of his own guilt. Guess we did get too heated and left her behind. You both should definitely apologize to her for that. Especially you, Izuku. Morgana scolded them, his pointed words causing the green-haired teen to wince. What do you mean? What happened? Anne asked curiously, seeing their bit of discomfort. It's kinda hard to explain. We'll tell you another time. Already got enough to worry about as is. Ryuji suggested, running a hand through his faux blonde hair. Well, if you say so. Anyways, I'm going to be heading off. From now on, I'll be counting on you all, okay? That includes you, Morgana. Anne smiled at the three kindly. The pleasure is all mine, Lady Anne. Morgana purred out, earning a small giggle from Anne before she took her leave. Watching her go, the feline let out a content sigh, leaning forward on Izuku's shoulder and resting his head on his forelegs. What an amazing girl, so kind and gentle yet fierce when it calls for it. She's like a wildfire that you can't help but watch despite the danger because it's just so beautiful. Izuku mumbled, a bit of sweat trailing down his brow. Dude. Ryuji said, cringing at Morgana's little speech. You know that you've basically got no chance, right? Being a cat and all. That's only right now. Morgana retorted, snapping his head toward Ryuji. Once I get a human body, I'll be able to woo Lady Anne right off her feet. If you say so. Ryuji muttered, rolling his eyes before looking at Izuku. Hey, I've been thinking that maybe we should have a place to always meet up quickly from now on. Good point. It would be smart to establish a secret hideout so that we can discuss our plans without having to worry about being eavesdropped on. Morgana agreed, Izuku humming for a moment before nodding in agreement. Yeah, that would be best. Even though most would dismiss what we're talking about, we don't want to get the wrong person's attention. Especially Kamoshida himself. Izuku said, earning nods of agreement from Ryuji and Morgana. Having a secret hideout makes us sound way more official, too. Ryuji chuckled, folding his hands behind his head. So, where should we station at? The rooftop. It would definitely have the most privacy and would be a fast place to meet up. It would definitely make for the perfect hideout. It doesn't seem like anyone goes up there. What do you think, Izuku? Morgana asked, expectant eyes landing on the green-haired teen. Regret immediately filled them both, realizing what they just suggested when they saw his expression. Izuku was biting his bottom lip, tears threatening at the edge of his eyes again. I'm sorry, Izuku. I hadn't thought about that place's significance. Why yeah, dude. We can find another place to use for a hideout. No big deal. Ryuji suggested this time, guilt audible in his voice. Izuku snapped his eyes shut and shook his head furiously. He took a moment to breath in and out, his body loosening up as he looked at the two with determination. No. The rooftop would make for a good hideout. We should use it for meeting up. Are you sure? Morgana asked, eyes still filled with concern. Yes, I am. Besides, it'll serve as a reminder of what we're fighting for every time we go up there. Izuku declared, his green orbs shining with conviction. Ryuji grinned, reaching a hand out and slapping him on the shoulder. Hell yeah. That's the spirit. We've got this. Ryuji said, reaching a fist up to Izuku. The green-haired teen blinked for a moment before smiling back, meeting it for a fist bump. Well, with that settled, I do have one more matter to bring up. Morgana declared, bringing both of their attention to him now. I've decided that I will be remaining in the real world so that I can meet up with everyone just as quick. The only problem that leaves is figuring out which of you will be taking care of me. Turning a feline grin toward Izuku, the green-haired teen suddenly felt pressure from his stare. I'm personally nominating you as my caretaker. You should feel honored. Wait, what? But I. That's all you, dude. My mom's allergic to cats, so Ryuji whistled out carelessly. An announcement over the intercom signaled for Ryuji's train, the faux blonde seeing it as his escape. Alright, then. Have fun with your new pet/roomie. He grinned before taking off in a sprint. Wait, Ryuji-senpai. Izuku called out, reaching desperately toward the receding back of his best friend. Watching him disappear. Izuku could only stand there lifeless as his new job started to settle in. It wasn't that he didn't like Morgana, but having him suddenly move in was a big jump from what they were previously discussing. It's for the best. Ryuji and I would probably argue way too much, anyway. Morgana waved a paw carelessly, turning expectant cat eyes toward Izuku. Now then, please show me to my new home. I am quite curious to what my residence will now be in this world. Izuku strangled out a few sounds, trying to find any reason to discourage this line of thinking by the cat. When none came, Izuku slumped forward in defeat and struggled out his answer. Okay. Izuku took a deep breath as he stood outside of LeBlanc. He still wasn't exactly sure about letting Morgana stay with him. Mostly because he had no idea how Sakura would react to this. He did, in fact, live in a cafe, after all. He wasn't even sure if animals would be allowed inside of LeBlanc in the first place. Of course, Izuku wasn't the best at expressing this to Morgana. The cat merely dismissed his worries and reminded Izuku that he had nowhere else to stay. It was clear to Izuku at this point that he wasn't going to be talking his way out of this one. I wasn't expecting you to live in a cafe. Is this normal for people to do? Morgana hummed thoughtfully, sticking out on Izuku's shoulder as he looked up at LeBlanc. And no, honestly. I'm still surprised by the arrangement too, but it's what Sakura-san wanted. Izuku shrugged, by this time at least settled into the idea of where he now lodged in. But you have to stay in the bag, Morgana-san. If Sakura-san sees you, I doubt he'll let me keep you. This is a cafe, after all. Fine. I'm getting back in, Morgana huffed, stuffing himself back into Izuku's school bag. The green-haired teen let out a sigh, gulping as he refocused forward. Okay, act casual. Sakura-san won't notice anything so long as Morgana keeps quiet and I keep my cool, he told himself, wiping the nervous sweat from his brow. Reaching toward the door, Izuku hesitated when it started to push open, looking back up to see a woman coming out. She had dark blue short-cut hair and pale skin. Around her neck was a black spiked choker. She wore a waist-high black leather jacket with an aqua top with web pattern on the front, followed by black jeans and tall black heels. Izuku realized he was in her way and quickly sidestepped, holding the door open for her. Sorry ma'am. He quickly said, a bit of nervousness in his voice. Older women seldom made him nervous like girls around his age, but he was still worried about being rude. The gothic woman raised a brow curiously. Sorry for what? She asked, her voice flat in her question. Well, for getting in your way. I didn't mean to. Izuku explained, looking down and rubbing his head sheepishly. You weren't really. Don't worry about it. She shrugged carelessly, slinging a handbag over her shoulder. So don't act so nervous. You'll never get a girlfriend if you always stammer like that. Izuku felt like the woman had punched him directly in the gut, slouching over further and nodding solemnly. Why yeah. The woman giggled lightly, starting to walk past him. No need to feel so depressed. Just keep being polite and try not to be nervous. Later. She said, waving over her shoulder as she headed down the path to the rest of Yonjin. Izuku looked up and watched as she left, breathing out as he felt the usual nervous tension leave his body. What a strange woman, he muttered, taking a moment before walking into LeBlanc. Inside the only person was Sojiro, the old shopkeeper, sparing an amused glance Izuku's way. I see the good doctor gave you a bit of a ring-round, huh? Sojiro chuckled, Izuku tensing as he realized that the shopkeeper had a full view of the awkward conversation. Why yeah she was. Izuku paused, realizing what Sojiro said. Wait, doctor. Yep. She runs a clinic just down the street, in fact. Sojiro nodded, leaning back against the bar. I haven't been there myself, but I've heard she gives crappy examinations and sells weird medicine. Of course that's just gossip. People should just leave her alone if she's not bothering them. Sojiro sighed, rolling his neck tiredly. Alright, I'm heading home. Make sure to turn off the lights. Yes sir. Izuku nodded, turning around and heading for the stairs. Hey, are we there yet? Izuku jumped when he heard Morgana's voice, sweat running down his cheeks as he turned his head slightly to look at Sojiro. The shopkeeper seemed to hear him too, though he doubted that Sojiro heard anything more than a meow. Not that it would make it any better in this situation. What was the just now? Sojiro muttered, looking around in thought before his eyes landed on Izuku. What was what? Izuku asked, trying to play as dumb as possible. Sojiro narrowed his eyes at Izuku, the green-haired teen trying his best not to flinch or crumble under his gaze. Sojiro watched him for a moment longer before finally huffing out. Well, whatever. I'm going now. His temporary guardian said, Izuku feeling some relief that he wasn't questioned any further. Have a good night, Sakura-san. Izuku said as he tried to casually walk up the stairs. Tried being the operative word as his body moved stiffly up each step. As he reached the top stair, Izuku spared a glance behind him to make sure that Sojiro hadn't followed him up, breathing in relief when he didn't see the shopkeeper in sight. Making his way over to his bed, Izuku placed the bag gently down, unzipping the top and letting Morgana jump out. Freedom, finally Morgana cooed in relief, stretching his body out now that he had room to move. Looking around, the cat blinked in shock. Wow, I knew you were a fan of heroes, but I didn't realize it was this big. Huh? Izuku looked around, his cheeks reddening in embarrassment as he realized what he meant. Izuku had put up the entirety of his All Might memorabilia, posters and banners littering the wall by the couch. On the dusty shelf on the other side of his room, a model figure sat. Crap, I totally forgot I put everything up, Izuku muttered, covering his face in mortification. So, All Might, huh? I knew that the name was popular among cognition. I've heard it echo in a lot of hearts and mementos. Morgana hummed, looking at the wall with some interest. It might be interesting to learn all that I can about someone so popular. Especially if he's got you as such a stellar fan. Really? You want to learn about All Might? Izuku asked, blinking in surprise. His surprise shifted to excitement, the embarrassment leaving him in an instant. There's so much I can tell you about All Might. Like his greatest battles, his TV appearances, and Izuku began to ramble like a giddy child in Morgana's face. He suddenly paused, Morgana's initial words ringing in his ear. Wait, what's? Mementos? Oh, that. Well, we'll save that explanation for another time. We have to remain focused on the palace, after all. Morgana dismissed, waving a paw in the air. Once that's done, I'll give you all the info you want on it. Izuku raised a brow, curious as to why Morgana might keep it to himself. Thinking about it though, if it wasn't relevant to their current situation, then it made sense. There was no need to distract from their mission with something else entirely. Hey, I know I heard a meow. Did you? Izuku froze when he heard Sojiro's voice, slowly craning his head back to look at the shopkeeper. Despite the initial aggression, Izuku soon realized that he was now distracted by the many posters on the wall of Izuku's room. Holy crap, kid. I knew you were a fan, but damn. Right. Morgana chuckled, the green-haired teen feeling like they were suddenly ganging up on him, despite the literal language barrier between the cat and Sojiro. Sojiro observed the posters for a moment before shaking his head, turning back to Izuku and Morgana. Back to what I was saying, I see you brought a cat here. Sojiro said, his tone sharp as he glanced at Morgana. Mind explaining what that's about? Sorry, I just found him all alone and abandoned. Izuku lied, hoping that it might sound convincing. It wasn't like he could explain that it was actually not a cat and it came from another dimension, after all. Look, I know you're always trying to do the kind thing, but this is a restaurant. Animals are a no-go. I don't want cat hair getting all over my food. Sojiro huffed, sparing a glance at Morgana. The cat was leaning down in the bed, looking somewhat anxious over the shouting. Glancing back at Izuku, who stood there timidly, Sojiro sighed. He glanced back at Morgana and scratched his head. Then again, maybe a pet would be a good distraction for you, Izuku, and Morgana brightened at this, the shopkeeper crossing his arms. It might help to have something to take care of to keep you out of trouble. So he can stay? Izuku asked hopefully, Sojiro humming for a moment before nodding. Fine. You can keep him. But keep him up here and don't let him run around downstairs, especially when customers are around. Sojiro relented, a smile spreading across the green-haired teen's lips. If I catch him downstairs, I'll toss it out. And don't expect me to feed it or pick up its poop, got it? Why yes, Sakura-san. Thank you. Izuku said gratefully, Sojiro just nodding silently before turning around and taking his leave. The two waited for Sojiro to walk down the stairs before sighing in relief, Morgana sitting up with more confidence. I'm guessing he's the ruler of this place. He's surprisingly understandable despite coming off so tough. Morgana hummed, glancing back up at Izuku. Yeah, Sakura-san isn't bad. He acts really serious, but he can be nice, too. Izuku smiled, having noted the shopkeeper's actions. He appreciated what Sojiro did for him by letting him stay here, and despite their initial impression of one another, were able to see a bit more in each other. Must be nice to have someone like that watching out for you. Morgana said, though became silent when the two heard footsteps climbing back up the stairs. Izuku opened his mouth to ask what else, but blinked when he saw a plate of canned tuna in his hand. It's hard to ignore the poor thing when it keeps making all those cute sounds. Sojiro sighed, placing the plate in front of Morgana, who eyed the food hungrily. Make sure to wash that plate. By the way, you have a name for it. Why yeah. Morgana, or Mona for short. Izuku informed him, the shopkeeper's cheek twitching up in disappointment. Darn. Kinda wish I would get to name it. Sojiro sighed, walking back to the stairs. Morgana chuckled, beginning to eat the fish happily. Careful, Izuku. I might dethrone you as the second man in charge of this place. Morgana teased, a small bead of sweat trailing down the green-haired teen's head. You know, this place isn't so bad. It's pretty shabby, but way nicer than Kamoshida's cells were. Plus it looks like you cleaned it up nicely enough. You should have seen it when I got here. It was a lot to clean up. Izuku chuckled, taking a seat on the bed next to Morgana. The chime of his phone suddenly went off, Izuku checking it to see a number he didn't recognize texting him. Did this number work, Midoriya? It's me, Takamaki. Izuku widened his eyes, realizing that he hadn't gotten her number. Ryuji-senpai must have given her my number. He mused, quickly typing his response up after saving the contact information to his phone. Izuku? It's me. Hello, senpai. Ann. Okay good. Wanted to make sure the number worked. Ann. On top of wanting to say thank you for today. Izuku widened his eyes at that, feeling a bit happy but attempting to dismiss the idea. Izuku? It was nothing, really. Sorry that we couldn't tell you from the start. Ann. It's fine, trust me. I wouldn't have believed it without seeing it for myself. I just wanted to let you and Ryuji know I appreciate you guys saving me. I'll be sure to return the favor and help catch that asshole. Izuku? Okay, then. We'll be relying on you, senpai. Ann. Considering everything we're going through together, I think you and Ryuji can call me by my first name. Ryuji told me to do the same. You okay with me calling you Izuku? Izuku stared at his phone, still as stone. After a moment, his face became a red-hot mess, steam practically exploding out of his ears. To have a girl tell him to call her by first name was a completely new experience. Sure, he called Makoto by her nickname, but that was back when they were children, and it just stuck with them. To have a girl give him the thumbs up for such was almost too much for his innocent heart to take. Are you okay, Izuku? Morgana asked, a cat equivalent of a brow raising on his head. Day just fine, Izuku muttered, his phone shaking in his hand as he struggled to type his response. Izuku? Sure, and no problem. It might be hard for me at first, but I'll try. Ann. Take it at your own pace lol. Ann. Ryuji told me it might be like that for you, anyway. Ann. Anyway, I'm heading to bed. Thanks again, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Izuku let out a sheepish laugh as he realized his best friend had already outed his habit to the twin-tailed blonde. Not that he minded. Izuku preferred it, in fact, so that he wouldn't seem completely awkward the next time they talked in person. After typing up his reply. Izuku set the phone down on the bed next to him. You talk to people and send messages with that thing, right? Morgana asked, sparing a glance at his phone. I want in on that. But since I wouldn't really be able to carry a phone or even type with it, I'll just rely on you to send messages for me. Sure, I can do that if you like. Izuku nodded, looking up in thought. I wonder, though there are people with animal appendages, so I wonder if I could find something that would work with your paws, but then again, we'd have to get you a phone plan, too. I think having you convey my messages will make things simpler. Morgana shrugged. But hey, that power you used to absorb its shadow was incredible. I didn't think such a thing was possible until now. We'll need to really work on getting more to cover up other weaknesses. But we'll also have to work on strengthening your heart. My heart? Izuku repeated, somewhat confused by the statement. Of course. Personas are the strength of heart, after all. You'll have to build that up if you want to keep gaining strength, same with me and the others. So, to help you do that, I'm going to be sticking with you at all times from now on. Morgana declared, Izuku blinking in question for a moment. What do you mean at all times? Like I'll have you carry me so that I go with you to school or around town, maybe. At all times. Izuku stared at the cat with a squint, unsure if the cat was making a joke or was actually being serious and wanting to be carried everywhere. Considering that the cat was still smiling up at him, Izuku assumed it was the latter. I'm not sure that's a great idea. Oh, don't be silly. It's perfect. I'll help you meet other people and stuff. It'll be fine. Plus, you can consider it part of the deal we made. Morgana dismissed, leaving little room for argument for Izuku. The green-haired teen wanted to say something, but was unfortunately held back by his low confidence, slumping over in defeat and relenting to Morgana's wish. Ring. Izuku sat back up and looked at his phone, picking it up to see Makoto's name on the front of his phone. Koto-san, I guess this would be a good time to apologize, Izuku muttered, scratching the back of his head. I would have liked to do it in person, but… Considering she messaged you first, it would be rude to not answer. I think it'll be fine to apologize now. Morgana suggested, earning a hesitant nod from the green-haired teen as he opened the message. Having not paid his phone much attention, he realized that Makoto had sent him several messages over the course of time they were in the cognitive world. Makoto. I heard that Kamoshida's going to expel you. Makoto. This is exactly why I told you not to run off like you did. Makoto. I know what happened hurt you, but that's why I wanted you to think things through. Makoto. Please message me when you can. Makoto. Just I hope you're both okay. Izuku felt guilt fill him, now realizing how much Makoto was concerned for them both after they left. Izuku had been so caught up in what happened to Shiho that he didn't think of how Makoto was feeling. Koto-san was there with us trying to help, but we ended up leaving her behind. Shaking his head, Izuku quickly began to type up his response. Izuku. I'm sorry that I didn't answer, Koto-san. Ryuji-senpai and I were running around. Izuku didn't have to wait long for a response, his phone buzzing almost immediately. Makoto. Thank goodness, but the next time I see you, I'm giving you a good smack. Izuku could only laugh sheepishly at that. At this point, he would allow the older teen to do whatever she felt like if it would make her feel better. Izuku. If that's what you want, it's okay. I owe you that much after running off like that, I'm sorry. We got too caught up in our anger and paid the price for it. If anything, I'm glad you didn't get grouped with us in that situation. Makoto's response wasn't immediate, likely taking in his apology and writing a bigger message as well in response. Makoto. No, it's not your fault. It's mine. If I had been of more use to you guys, this might not have happened this way, I'm the one that's sorry. Izuku felt a frown twitch across his face, concern filling him for his old friend after seeing that she was blaming herself for their potential expulsion. Izuku. No, it's not yours, Koto-san. It's not even mine, either. The real person at fault is Kamoshida. Izuku paused for a moment, thinking over what he wanted to say next. He had to think of something that might make Makoto feel better about the situation. He had to let her know that Kamoshida was going to be dealt with. Though he wouldn't be able to tell her how it would go down. As much as Izuku wanted to tell her everything, he couldn't. Izuku wouldn't throw her into potential danger like that. He knew that she would be willing to despite that, but there was no telling if a persona would manifest in her or not. Izuku. And don't worry. Ryuji-senpai and I have found a way to take him down. We won't let him get away with this. Makoto. You have how? What are you guys planning to do? Izuku. I can't tell you that. I know you want to help, but this is dangerous. Makoto. I don't care if it is, I want to help. Tell me, what are you planning to do? Izuku. I know you want to help, but I won't let you put your future at risk. Ryuji-senpai and I have everything to lose right now, so it doesn't matter either way for us. But if we fail and you're involved, Izuku couldn't tell her how real the danger was, but he could at least make her aware of the real-world problems it would create. Though he couldn't speak of the potential jail time he was going to do if Kamoshida died, but that was another matter entirely. You'll lose everything. I won't let that happen. Makoto. Izuku, what is going on? Izuku couldn't answer her question, shutting his eyes as he decided to ignore any further messages. He had said too much. The plan was to make Makoto feel better, but now Izuku knew that he had only made her worry more. I'm an idiot, he muttered, biting his bottom lip in frustration. You were trying your best. Sometimes, our best isn't enough. Morgana suddenly spoke, reminding the green-haired teen that he was there, apparently watching the text exchange. Are you sure that you don't want to bring her into this? It might help reassure her of what's going on, at least. Izuku looked at Morgana with some thought, this time considering the potential of inviting Makoto. Despite what she might be able to provide, Izuku couldn't think of throwing her into danger like that. Makoto had given up on becoming a hero a long time ago, and despite the strength of her quirk, he had no idea how much training she kept up with it. He wasn't willing to bet her life on it, either. I'm sure maybe once this is over, I'll at least show Koto-san that place, but not while we still have to run into danger. Izuku declared, releasing a heavy sigh before kicking his legs up on his bed, lying on his back. It's for the best. Morgana watched him for a moment in concern, but still said nothing, trotting up to his side and lying down next to his hip. Makoto anxiously waited for any response from Izuku, something that might give her a clue to what he was planning. But after waiting 10 minutes, she realized that Izuku wasn't going to answer anymore. He had walled her out of his plans against Kamoshida. Why can't he just tell me? Makoto wondered, gripping her phone in agitation and fear. Am I really that useless? Even to Midori, who I used to want to protect from everything. Is everything alright, Makoto? The brunette was pulled from her dark thoughts, looking away from her phone. Next to their dining room table was her sister, Seinajima. She shared Makoto's fair skin and red eyes, but their facial structures were different. The older woman was a bit more slender, less built as Makoto, who still practiced her aikido. Sei wore a feminine black business suit with a black turtleneck. Her hair was long and silver, parting at the top right of her scalp to show her face. Makoto didn't answer immediately, blinking before immediately setting her phone down. Why yes, everything's alright, just some drama at school, as all. Makoto tried to dismiss, standing from her seat. I made some dinner for you in the kitchen. Let me grab it. It's fine, I'm already up. Sei dismissed, walking into the kitchen. This school drama. You're not letting it get in the way of your studies, are you? Oh, of course not. I'm still keeping my grades up as usual, sis. Makoto said, glancing down at the coffee table. At this point, it was her only distraction from the fact that she was being left out by Izuku. Even if it had become somewhat hard to focus, especially now. If you say so. Make sure it stays that way. You don't need drama to distract you right now. Save it for when you've made it into college. Sei said, her voice echoing out from the kitchen. Alright, I won't let that happen. Makoto sighed, eyes slowly trailing back to her phone. Maybe sis is right. Maybe that's all I'm good for. I can't help Midori anyway. And he doesn't want my help either. Chapter 12. Mishima had a fair share of regrets in his life. Mostly it was typical things like the missed opportunities. Being unable to make real friends. Allowing himself to be the victim of bullies in Kamoshida. Never being able to stick out in anything he had ever done in life. But all of those things paled in comparison to his latest regret. Mishima had played a role in Shiho's attempted suicide. The plain-looking teen had sent Shiho to Kamoshida's office at his request, which would lead to the events that occurred. Now, looking at it logically, he could have seen that his involvement was minimal and played no real effect in her decision. But regardless of how insignificant, Mishima couldn't stop from feeling an insufferable amount of guilt. He could have just pretended not to see Shiho. He could have just let her go home, rather than telling her Kamoshida wanted her for something. But Mishima didn't want to be the latest victim of his abuse. He decided to be selfish and offered up Shiho in exchange. Mishima's selfishness led to Shiho stepping off that ledge. Please help me petition, everyone. Mishima called out meekly, waving a clipboard in the air. He stood alone in the halls at lunchtime, trying to get any students passing by his attention. While Mishima might not have been the most noticeable person, he was at least garnering some inquisitive eyes around him. I'm trying to get Recovery Girl to come to the hospital and help Shiho Suzui. I want to help speed along Suzui-san's health the best I can. So please help by signing this. Maybe if we can get her to see exactly how much people care, she'll be the hero we know she is and help Suzui-san. While Mishima might not have been able to get everyone around him to notice, he felt some pride in the fact that several students had stopped to listen. Whispers started to echo around him, students slowly stepping forward and pulling out their pens. Mishima brimmed with appreciation, offering the clipboard to the closest student. Please pass it around after you've signed. Thank you. Now what exactly is going on here? Mishima felt his heart sink, trembling ever so slightly as he craned his head. Students around him started to pause, following his line of sight to Kamoshida. Those who didn't know better greeted him with smiles and hellos. Mishima, on the other hand, gripped the clipboard in his hand quite fearfully. Hiya, Kamoshida-sensei. One of the second-year female students greeted. Mishima-san's trying to get Recovery Girl to come and help poor Suzui-san in the hospital. I think it's a good idea. Are you going to sign? Kamoshida's eyes narrowed venomously for a single moment, one that most save for the plain teen would not notice at all. The only reason Mishima did was because it was often that he would do so when hearing something that displeased him, but because he was in public had to put on a facade. Ah, I see. That actually sounds like a good idea. I'm sure if you were able to get it to Recovery Girl, she would leap at the chance to help the poor girl. Great plan, Mishima. Kamoshida plastered on his practiced smile, earning some praise from students around him. Mishima saw right through it though, taking a small step back as the coach approached him. There was no escape though, Mishima flinching as the coach put a seemingly friendly hand on his shoulder, but gripped it painfully. But as much good as this might be, I have to ask. Did you get approval from the office before coming out here to get signatures? Mishima's eyes fell to the ground, unable to look the scumbag coach directly. And no, I thought that it might take too long if I did. That was a lie. Mishima knew if he got it processed through the office, Kamoshida would tear the paper up before it could even be looked at. Well, I'm sorry to say this, but I can't allow this petition to go on. Not so long as it doesn't have the proper approval. Kamoshida declared, earning some disheartened looks around him. But to clean the ignorant masses of any doubts, Kamoshida once again grinned. But hey, I have an idea. Let me take this to the office and I'll get all the technical stuff sorted and out of the way. One talk with the principal and I'll have it back to you in no time. Oh, Kamoshida-sensei. You're like a real hero, too. One girl called out, earning a chorus of praises around them. Miss Hima felt his body tremble, knowing that their praise was going to the monster that caused the calamity from the day before. He wanted to shout, to tell them they were all being idiots and they were wrong about Kamoshida. But even if the coach wasn't there, Miss Hima knew he didn't have the strength to call him out. It would fall on deaf ears and other students would go back to shunning him. To treating him like a zero. Now, Miss Hima. You can safely hand that off to me for now and I'll take care of the rest. Kamoshida told him, though Miss Hima could hear the demand in his voice as the grip on his shoulder tightened. Miss Hima's grip on the clipboard was now shaky, not wanting to let go, but not seeing any other way out of this. I'm sorry I'm so useless, Suzui, I'm sorry I couldn't help you out. You don't have to worry about that. Miss Hima and Kamoshida blinked, both turning their gazes to see Makoto Najima standing just inside the crowd of students. She offered a curt smile, placing a hand on her hip. I was actually planning something similar. I'm quite pleased to see another student was thinking of asking for Recovery Girl's help, too. Miss Hima felt a small kindling of hope return to him, Kamoshida's grip on his shoulder loosening as the coach turned his attention to the student council president. Oh, is that right? It's truly inspiring to hear that the student pres is taking care of business. Kamoshida cleared his throat, now sporting a more kind grin. Behind the facade, Miss Hima and Makoto knew that the coach was furious. That's right. Since the paperwork and approval is all settled, Miss Hima-san can continue his effort to get signatures. In fact, I'll be sure to get some third-year signatures as well. Makoto declared, not at all dropping her act in the face of the coach. Kamoshida stepped forward, but stopped. Miss Hima knew what held him back. Makoto was outside of his control. She wasn't in any sports, and she was a rather high-praised student among the teachers. Wow, I hadn't realized you cared so much, Najima-senpai. You're amazing. Students began to give their praise to the student council president, Kamoshida's eyes looking around at the crowd with hidden disdain before landing on Makoto. The two made eye contact, his narrowing ever so slightly while she continued to beam. Miss Hima couldn't help but fear for the student council president now. While Kamoshida couldn't stop her in any way right now, she had just put herself in his sights. I'd like to sign that petition. Kamoshida suddenly tensed, Miss Hima looking to the side to see Izuku Midoriya standing there. Ryuji Sakamoto was close behind, as well as Ann Takamaki. Miss Hima saw it out of the corner of his eye, but noticed Makoto's expression falter the moment she saw him. Whispers started to surround them again, this time of suspicion and fear. All for the first-year student with a criminal record. In spite of the chatter, Izuku proceeded toward Miss Hima, offering a kind smile as he held out his hand. I believe Recovery Girl would help if she saw this, too. Please, let me sign. Miss Hima hesitated for a moment, at first still somewhat shaken by Kamoshida's presence. But looking up at Izuku, Miss Hima found a bit of courage within, slowly handing the clipboard over to him. It's nice to see when a punk with a record tries to do some good in the wake of a tragedy. Kamoshida offhandedly remarked. Approaching the two and offering a plastic smile. Izuku signed his name before looking up at Kamoshida with a glare, not bothering to reply as Kamoshida leaned forward. But it won't do you any good. You'll be gone and off to jail in 2 weeks' time. Kamoshida whispered quietly enough for only Izuku and Miss Hima to hear. Miss Hima was instilled with fear once again, afraid that this one act might have painted himself with the same fate. But despite the promise, Izuku just continued to glare, not making a sound in response. Kamoshida didn't linger, not wanting other students to suspect him of his true nature. I hope you all take care. Especially you, Takamaki-chan. I know Suzui was an important friend of yours. Kamoshida said, giving a smile that made Ann sick to her stomach just looking at it. Bastard, Ryuji muttered to the side, Ann staying close behind him as Kamoshida marched past. I'll sign too. Me three. Ann offered, giving a small smile to Miss Hima in encouragement. Izuku handed the clipboard back to them, allowing them to put their signatures in. Thank you, Miss Hima muttered out, looking at Izuku and Ryuji. I'm sorry that Kamoshida's going to expel you, though. We'll see about that, Ryuji huffed before giving him a thumbs up. But, hey. Keep up the good work and get more signatures. Suzui could use a hero right about now. I'm glad someone's doing their best to look out for Shiho. Thank you. Ann declared, giving Miss Hima a small but genuine smile. Alright. I'll keep getting more students to sign. Miss Hima nodded before taking the clipboard from them and heading to the other students, now busying himself in discussion. At least someone cares to do something. Anne sighed, glancing at her two comrades. So then, after school on the roof, right? That's right. We're going to plan our next move from there. Izuku said, nodding in confirmation. And what exactly are you planning to do? Izuku suddenly tensed, now realizing that Makoto was still standing there behind him. Anne and Ryuji widened their eyes, feeling the intensity as Makoto stepped forward. The green-haired teen slowly craned his neck, now becoming fearful of talking to the third-year student president. He was honestly hoping to avoid her until the entire ordeal was over. The likeliness of that was low, obviously, but Izuku hoped for it nonetheless. Obviously, he failed in such plans immediately. Koto-san, we were just. Whack. Izuku held the top of his head in pain, Makoto having chopped it with a decent amount of force. I told you that I owed you a smack for making me worry all day yesterday. She huffed, crossing her arms expectantly. Alright. So I will be going. Ryuji laughed uneasily, backing away from the two as he grabbed Anne's arm and pulling her back with him. Why yeah, we've gotta get some food, you know. So bye. Anne pitifully excused herself, the two quickly turning around and marching away. Izuku couldn't help but feel abandoned at this point, even if he was expecting this talk. Well, he wasn't technically alone, Morgana being in his bag, the cat couldn't possibly help him in this discussion. I didn't realize Takamaki-san was now part of this. Makoto said, her voice hiding little of her accusation as her glare faltered into a more dejected expression. It was enough to make Izuku wince in guilt. So I was that useless after all, huh? And no. It's nothing like that. Izuku quickly disregarded, taking Makoto off guard for a moment. Takamaki-senpai Suzui-senpai was her best friend. She ended up sort of involving herself before we could stop her. He admitted with a sigh, eyes cast to the ground. As much as he wanted to tell Makoto the truth, he wasn't willing to risk the danger. If Makoto was half as stubborn as she was as a child, he knew that there would be no stopping her from that point on. I can't let you get any further down that hole. If we mess up, it could mean your future, too. Makoto opened her mouth, wanting to argue. Wanting to tell him that she was ready for anything and was willing to take the risk. But immediately, she was reminded of her sister. If they failed and things did go as terribly as he suspected, Sei would end up paying for her mistakes. Her older sister would end up being put through so much pain. Just like when their father passed. But it would be Makoto's fault. This put her at an impasse, though. Despite the passage of time, Makoto still felt a deep care for Midoriya. She wanted to help him get out of this situation, whatever the risk. If it were to only affect her, there would be no question about it. But should they fail, how could she put Sei through such trouble after all their suffering? Makoto bit her bottom lip, shutting her eyes tightly and turning her head away from him. Okay, I understand. Izuku's eyes widened, thankful but confused about Makoto's decision. Whatever it is you have to do, I hope you can make it work. So by the end of this you better not mess things up. We just reunited, after all. Makoto told him, offering a sullen but somewhat encouraging smile. Izuku was silent for a moment, still a bit shocked by her decision. Shaking his head, Izuku felt determination well up within him, nodding in acceptance. Okay. I'll do whatever it takes. Thank you, Koto-san. Makoto merely nodded before turning around, heading to the stairs silently. Despite her blessing, Izuku couldn't help but feel somewhat conflicted over the situation. I think that actually went well, all things considered. Morgana said, finally revealing himself as he poked his head out of Izuku's bag. Seeing Izuku's hesitation, the cat tilted his head. Are you alright? Why yeah, I just still feel bad. But I'm glad she was able to understand. Looking back at Morgana, Izuku furrowed his brow seriously. Let's not fail, no matter what. Alright, let's get going. Ryuji huffed, tapping his foot impatiently. As discussed, the four met on the rooftop after school. I wanna hurry and take that asshole out. The sooner the better. Not so fast, Ryuji. We're going to be making some preparations before we head in. Morgana spoke up, causing the faux blonde to blink in confusion. Preparations? What do we need to do that for? We'll just go in and use our personas to kick ass like we've been doing. Ryuji argued, only for the cat to shake his head. Don't underestimate the objective ahead of us. We still have a lot to push through. What we need is proper equipment and rations for our time inside of the palace. Morgana explained, earning a grunt of annoyance from Ryuji. He's right, Ryuji-senpai. We might end up spending hours inside the palace with a lot of fighting. While our personas are strong, using them drains our stamina. Not to mention we'll need to be prepared for when one of us gets injured. Izuku spoke up this time, looking down at the ground as he held his chin and thought. What we need to do is perhaps get more intimidating model guns, food and drinks for keeping our energy up and medicine and bandages for any resulting injuries. Morgana-san might have a healing power, but we don't know to what extent and how much stamina it would take to constantly heal us. Well, when you put it like that, I guess preparing wouldn't be a bad idea. Anne hummed, having wanted to dive into the palace as well, but seeing the reasoning behind his words. Alright, fine. I get it. Ryuji sighed before his expression brightened. Oh, but I do know a place we can go to get more equipment. We can go there now if you guys want. Actually, Izuku and I are planning to pay a visit to a local doctor in Yonjin. How about you and Anne handle that and the food rations we'll be needing for our energy? Morgana suggested, though Izuku grimaced at the mention of the doctor. I'm still not sure about going to see her. It would be pretty strange for me to ask for medicine, don't you think? Izuku mumbled, earning some odd looks from Ryuji and Anne. You worry way too much. We'll just make up an excuse like you're sick or something. Morgana waved him off, eliciting a sigh from the green-haired teen. Why don't we just buy some over-the-counter stuff? Anne suggested, but earned a head shake from Morgana. If injuries get bad enough, nothing store-bought will be enough to help. We need some serious medicine to help us out. If anything, just get some bandages and antiseptics. We'll handle the bigger stuff. Morgana said, nods of understanding coming from Ryuji and Anne. Now let's go, Izuku. We're going to have to do our part and convince the doctor ourselves. And by we I mean you. How am I supposed to convince her? Izuku gulped as he stood in front of the clinic. He was surprised just how close it was to LeBlanc, the coffee shop only around the corner. Still, he was wishing that it was somewhere a bit farther at this point. The doctor had been a bit intimidating during their first meeting. Though that was mostly because of her blunt attitude rather than her demeanor. And now Izuku was supposed to convince this doctor to provide him with some strong medicine, with some scrounge-up excuse. That wouldn't be the easiest thing to do considering he had only seen her the day before. Her suspicions will be rather high. Hey, are you sure this is a good idea? Izuku said, turning his head back to his bag. Morgana poked his head out, giving him a stern look. Come on, Izuku. We need more than some migraine medicine for what's ahead. This is our best option available. Morgana reasoned, pointing a paw toward the office. Now get in there and work your magic. You're a pretty good tactician on the field. I'll believe in your ability to adapt here as well. The combat situation and social interactions are in no way the same. Izuku mentally screeched, biting his bottom lip as he turned back to the clinic. With a heavy sigh, Izuku mustered up some small remnants of courage within him, stiffly walking forward and opening the door to the clinic. Inside, compact would be the most accurate description. The office was faded white paint, likely having not been touched with a brush in ages. In the small lobby, a cheap red cushioned sofa sat under the corkboard that held several pamphlets and papers. Just to Izuku's left was the reception counter that protected the top half with a glass window. Izuku immediately met eyes with the doctor from before, who sat behind the counter. Hello, welcome to Takemi's medical clinic. Is this your first visit? The doctor asked, her voice flat and carrying little to no energy. Recognition crossed her features, the gothic doctor raising a brow. Hey. Weren't you the jumpy kid from the cafe? Yeah. That's me. Izuku nervously laughed, scratching the back of his head before bowing politely. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Please take care of me. Dr. Takemi. Surprised to see you again so soon. She answered, leaning back in her chair. So, are you here for a visit? Or did you decide it was love at first sight and stalk me? Huh? Izuku blinked owlishly at her casual accusation, immediately waving his arms urgently in dismissal. No, it's nothing like that. I just heard you were a doctor and thought you could help me. Don't take everything so seriously, kid. Takemi said with an amused giggle before standing from her seat. So what's the problem? Let me guess, you want something to help calm your nerves. I'd want something like that if I was as jittery as you. Well, it's a combination of things. I have trouble focusing and lose energy while I'm forced to study. Izuku tried to remember what he had practiced before. Giving her some half-assed excuse would lead to something over the counter that wouldn't be of much help. They needed something for their energy and keeping them healthy while inside the palace. Takemi stared at him for a moment, most likely assessing his answers before nodding. Alright. Go head to the exam room and wait for me. She said, pointing a finger at the door just ahead of Izuku. The green-haired teen stiffly nodded, following her direction silently as he walked forward and opened the door. Not too bad so far. If I just keep up my act, I should be able to get what we need. She already thinks I'm pretty jumpy, so that might help. Izuku let out a small breath, trying to relax a bit as he took a seat. The exam room was bigger than the lobby, a desk with files and a monitor on top of it, and to his right a blue-cushioned comforter. Takemi didn't take long to join him, walking inside and taking a seat in the computer chair by her desk. So, then. From what you've described to me, it sounds like a combination of stress and anxiety. You've probably been unable to focus because you're worried about everything going on which, combined with your jittery personality, is definitely not good. Takemi declared, humming in thought while Izuku couldn't help but face fault at her unrelenting assessment. Perhaps you do well with some muscle relaxers. Maybe even some pain relievers. And no, muscle relaxers would make me fall asleep. I need something to help me when I'm studying and active. Izuku shook his head, trying to get something specific so that it wouldn't knock someone out during their mission. Ah, so this is about your studies, then. Well, I think I can give you something that will help you focus and top it off with a painkiller that won't knock you out. Takemi hummed, scribbling something on a clipboard in her hand before shifting her gaze. That is if you start to be a bit more honest with me. Izuku blinked, taken off guard by her words. What do you mean? You're pretty smart. You used your complex to your advantage to try and get something specific to what you need. Takemi declared, crossing her legs and leaning an elbow on her knee. But perhaps a bit too specific. You might actually need it to study, but I get the feeling there's more to it. I'm not as dumb as I look. I don't think you're dumb, Izuku started to panic, sweat trailing down his face as he waved his arms around frantically. His conversation skills were already pretty weak, having to recover after losing his momentum wasn't the easiest thing to do for him. I've just got a lot on my plate, Izuku admitted, not technically lying as his eyes trailed to the ground. I see. Takemi hummed, silent for a moment in thought. Things are pretty tough for teenagers nowadays, and judging from how you are, I doubt you're up to no good. Okay, I'll sell you some medicine. Izuku blinked, looking back up at Takemi in complete shock. Oh really? Yeah. Just some stuff to help with your health and focus, though. Nothing really strong. Takemi declared, looking back down at her board and writing something else. Just know that this is my private practice. I make the majority of my medicine myself. I'm sure you've heard about some of the crazy medicine I produce, correct? And not that much, honestly. Someone mentioned it in passing, but that's about it. Izuku admitted, scratching the back of his head. Huh. Normally people come to me after hearing some of the outlandish rumors. I was suspicious as I was because that's usually the case. Takemi admitted, leaning back in her chair. Here's a list of the medicines I can provide and what they'll do for you. You can work out the amount and cost on your own. Takemi handed him the clipboard, a list presented to him. Izuku had a bit of an allowance given to him from his mother each month, as well as the small amount of cash that they picked up from shadows they defeated. He wasn't able to get much with what he had, but Izuku picked out the most useful medicine on the list to them. Takemi took a quick look before standing up and retrieving his desired medicine and pulling them out of a nearby cabinet, handing him a paper bag with each bottle inside. Alright. Please come again. Thank you, Takemi-sensei. Izuku said in appreciation, bowing before turning around to take his leave. The moment he opened the door, a middle-aged man was on the other side. Izuku blinked in surprise, stepping aside to let the man in before closing the door after him. Oh, doctor. What brings you here? Do you need some medicine? Perhaps something for a headache or athlete's foot? Izuku heard through the door, hesitating for a moment. While Takemi's voice was as flat as usual, he could pick up on the obvious sarcasm. Not to mention she knew the man. Don't mess with me, Takemi. I came here because of all the talk. I've been hearing tale that you're still making some mysterious drugs lately. Something along the lines of some super energy drug that can keep people going. Izuku widened his eyes, becoming more interested in the conversation. He felt bad about eavesdropping, but something along those lines could help the team out greatly. Not that he could take rumors as anything more than that. While Takemi was definitely odd, was she really so strange that she created super medicines like that? First I've ever heard of it. Sounds like something a genius would come up with. I'm just a quack. So why not leave me alone and leave it at that? Takemi countered with little emotion, the blue-haired doctor keeping up a strong guard from the sound of it. So long as you keep quiet and stay in your little corner of town, I might. But when you start causing a ruckus with your odd medicine, it brings too much attention to yourself. I don't need you stealing my clients. The doctor snapped in irritation, Izuku raising a brow at his odd amount of aggression. You're a disgrace to the medical community. The name Takemi will forever be infamous. DSK. Was Takemi's only response. She was obviously annoyed by his words, but didn't lash back. Izuku knew she had a sharp tongue and was a bit surprised not to hear her retort. But then again, what went on to cause all of this was still a mystery to him. Hey, is someone out there? Izuku jumped in surprise, instinctively running to the door and rushing out. Izuku hadn't realized how long he had been eavesdropping, feeling far more nervous than he would have expected. He couldn't really get in trouble for eavesdropping, but it was a natural reaction after hearing something you shouldn't have. Talk about interesting. Good job sticking around until the end. Morgana praised, sticking his upper half out again and leaning on his shoulder. If what that other doctor said was true, we might have something very helpful at our disposal. I didn't really see anything on Takemi-sensei's log that would indicate something like that. I'm not sure how legitimate the rumor might be. Izuku suggested, holding his chin in thought. It might be better to let this go rather than dig deeper. She was willing to sell us a few useful things as is. But don't you think a super drug with unlimited energy sounds incredibly useful? Yes, but there are plenty of illegal narcotics with the same effect. It could be a terrible recreational drug for all we know. Izuku reminded him, the cat's ears drooping slightly. I don't think Takemi-sensei would sell something illegal like that, but I think reminding her of all the rumors would be rude. Oh, yeah, I suppose you could be right. Morgana sighed in resignation. I still think we should look into it, but we'll take what we can get for now. Ryuji and Anne roamed the aisles of Shibuya's quick-stop convenience store, trying to find the best sources of energy for their trip through the palace. So what kind of drink should we bring? Soda or energy drinks? Anne asked, holding the tip of her chin as she looked at the assortment of bottled refreshments. Neither. Energy drinks might help for a bit, but you get a heavy crash after a while. Ryuji suggested, eyes narrowing as he looked at certain products. We'll need some green apples and oranges to help keep us on our feet and full. As far as drinks go, I'd say something like sports drinks and water for when we stop in a safe room. If we get some energy drinks, just a few in case we need some emergency energy quick. You sure know your stuff, huh? Then again you were on the track team, right? Anne smirked, looking at Ryuji from the side while mildly impressed. Yep. Used to work out pretty damn hard in those days. Considering what we gotta do, we're probably going to spend a lot of energy. Ryuji hummed, grabbing several drinks from the shelf and placing them in the arm basket he was carrying. You're pretty thin. Don't you work out? Me? Not really. I've just always been able to stay skinny. Anne shrugged, earning an owlish blink from Ryuji. What? No way. I remember how much you used to woof down in middle school. You'd eat like 2 kids' portions back then. Ryuji recalled, somewhat amazed and disgusted at the same time. Hey. It's rude to point out a girl's eating habits, you know. Anne snapped indignantly back, brow furrowing in annoyance. You used to say that a lot in middle school, too. Ryuji chuckled carelessly, moving on to the produce section with Anne close behind. Hey, got any snack ideas? Fruit should be fine, but if you got something in mind that'll help keep your energy up, you should grab it. Well, chocolate does sound good, maybe some pastries too. Anne said, smiling at the thought of bringing some donuts to eat with them during their likely dangerous tour of the castle. I said something for energy, not something to satisfy your sweet tooth. Ryuji blanched, half-lidded eyes staring at Anne in disappointment. Oh, let me eat what I want. If it helps, then it helps. Anne retorted, only earning a resigned sigh from Ryuji. Fine, whatever. Get whatever you think will help, then. Ryuji conceded, a triumphant grin spreading across Anne's lips as she fist-pumped. We're gonna be putting in so much physical activity, it might not matter much for your weight, anyway. Still, careful eating so many sweets or you'll get fat. You just know exactly what to say to a girl, huh? Anne huffed irritably, the two falling silent for a moment as she went and retrieved several sweets and tossed them in his basket. They walked around for a bit longer, scanning for any last-minute additions to what they already stocked up on. Hey Ryuji. Sup? How did Izuku get involved in all of this? Anne asked, causing the faux blonde to blink stop what he was doing, turning a raised brow to Anne. I've just been trying to think it over. I mean, I know that you and him were the first ones to go in, but he's not like you or me. We've got something really personal against that asshole. What's his reason? Ryuji scratched the back of his neck, unsure how to answer the question at first. Well, that's not technically true. I guess we didn't say so before, but Kamoshida's the one who leaked his criminal record. Wait, what? Anne's eyes widened in surprise. But why? I mean, it definitely seems like something Kamoshida would do, but Izuku just got here. Why pick on him? Beats me, honestly. Izuku and Morgana think it's probably because he didn't want his reputation to be overshadowed. He probably thought leaking the record would make him switch schools or something. Ryuji shrugged, still a bit confused over the subject. Though, thinking about it now, that's not really the reason he decided to stand up to Kamoshida. It's not. Then what was? Anne asked curiously. This question seemed to pose some difficulty to Ryuji though, the faux blonde biting his bottom lip anxiously. What is it? Well, I'm not sure if he'd want me telling you this, but I'd say you deserve to know. Plus, I doubt he'd want to be the one to tell you. It's still pretty fresh in his mind, after all. Ryuji sighed, leaning against the edge of a produce stand. Izuku was there on the rooftop yesterday. Anne felt her body tense, eyes widening as her hand clutched at her side. What? She muttered out, the scene playing out in her mind again just from the reminder. It made her blood run cold. Izuku said that Suzui was the only other person aside from me and Najima-senpai to make him feel better about being at our school. Ryuji went on to explain, his voice slightly faltering. He saw her going up to the roof and knew something was wrong. He followed her up and when he realized what she was doing tried his best to stop her. But he was too late. But before she jumped, she told Izuku what Kamoshida did to her. Izuku wasn't sure what the right thing to do was before, but when that happened, he knew exactly what he needs to do. Anne's gaze fell to the ground, eyes misting up as she felt shame beginning to consume her. How much of an idiot am I, her best friend, that I couldn't see what was going on, but someone she barely met picked up on it before me. Anne mumbled out, biting her bottom lip in frustration as she brought her hands up to her face, gripping at her hair in frustration. Ryuji rubbed his arm, now feeling guilty for making Anne feel so terrible because of what he said. He hesitated for a moment before reaching a hand out and gripping her shoulder, and looking up to see Ryuji giving her a look of determination. Hey. What's done is done. All we can do now is fix what's been messed up. You, me, Izuku and Morgana. We're gonna make that asshole pay. And you're gonna get revenge for Suzui. So keep your chin up, alright? Ryuji encouraged her the best he could, his voice remaining even and strong as he spoke. Anne stared at him for a moment longer before nodding, giving a weak smile as she wiped her eyes on her jacket's sleeve. Why yeah, you're right, we've got plenty of work to do, too. So let's make sure we're prepared. Anne said, letting out a small cough to clear her throat and even her voice back out as she gave him a smile. Thanks for reminding me. No problem. We're a team now. From now on, we got each other's backs. Ryuji declared, giving a toothy grin and a thumbs up to the twin-tailed blonde. You know, you actually sounded kind of cool there for a bit, Ryuji. Anne teasingly giggled, earning a pouty lip from the faux blonde. Only for a bit. Ryuji replied indignantly, only for Anne to shrug her shoulders before turning her back to him. I have to admit, though. Izuku's a lot tougher than I thought. Anne remarked, sparing a glance back at Ryuji. He acts so timid, but he was fighting just as hard as any of us. He even helped me get back on my feet. Yeah, he can be kinda confusing that way, huh? Ryuji chuckled, giving a small but proud smile. I've only known him a few days, but I really like the guy. He wanted to be a hero before all this, you know. That got ripped away from him by a shitty adult too, though. It's definitely something I can relate to. A hero? Him? Anne asked in mild surprise, raising a brow. I mean, after yesterday I can definitely see it, but isn't he quirkless? Yeah, he is. From the beginning he had it rough going that route. But then it was completely pulled away when he got a record for some bullshit. Ryuji paused when he heard his phone chime, pulling it out and checking the messages. Hey, it's Izuku. He says they got the medicine. If we want, we can meet him at the shop I mentioned earlier. Nah, I wouldn't really know what to get. I mean, I got a cool submachine gun along with a whip in my persona, but I still don't know much about weapons. Anne shrugged, slinging her bag over her shoulders. Plus I've gotta head home soon. Why don't you two handle it and get me whatever you think works? If you say so. Izuku lives all the way in Yonjin, so no reason to make him take a train back. Might as well just handle it tomorrow. Ryuji shrugged before texting Izuku back. With that, the two purchased their supplies before dispersing from Shibuya. Izuku walked close behind Ryuji as they entered a small shop titled Untouchable. Izuku was a bit surprised that the store was hidden away in the back alley of Shibuya's main street, which was unusual considering the traffic that a shop would want on the main street. Izuku's only guess as to why that might be would be cheaper rented space in the alley. It certainly didn't make the shop very attractive to people and looked more like a shady business rather than a legitimate store. Alright, we're here. This is where I got that snipe pistol from. Ryuji declared, the faux blonde grinning dumbly as he looked around. The inside was no more impressive than the outside, being small and a bit clustered. At the front counter, a man was sitting with his legs kicked up and a magazine in his hand. He wore a heavy gray jacket and matching hat. On his hat was a pair of ear mufflers that one might find in a shooting range. He looked to be middle-aged, gray hair sticking out under his hat along with stubble on his chin. The man paid them little mind, focusing on the magazine in his hand. I've never been in a store like this, it's strange to see so many model guns in one place. Izuku admitted, looking around the shop with mild interest. Okay, let's pick out the best looking guns. From what Morgana said, the more realistic it looks the better it will perform due to cognition. Sounds like a plan. We should ask a shopkeep for the recommendations. It'll save us some time. Ryuji suggested, jerking a thumb toward the man behind the counter. Izuku and Ryuji walked up, waiting for the man to take notice of them. They were silent, not trying to be rude while the man supposedly remained ignorant. At first they thought he might not have noticed them, but that idea was dismissed when he spared them a small glance before returning his attention back to his magazine. Hey. We need some help here. The man sighed in resignation, folding up his magazine and kicking his legs down. What do you want? If you're looking for cosplay, the selection out there should be enough. We're not looking for some plastic kid stuff, we want some real looking crap. Ryuji disregarded, earning a skeptical look from the shopkeep. We're collecting some decent models, so we're not messing around with the lame shit. Is that right? Okay then, what are you looking for in a gun? A rifle? An automatic? An assault weapon? He questioned, obviously testing Ryuji's supposed knowledge of guns. The confused look on Ryuji's face had been answer enough. The automatic. Ryuji muttered dumbly, Izuku sweating slightly as he realized how quickly Ryuji exposed his naivety in guns. Why the hell does a car preference matter? Our Ryuji-senpai, he's talking about an automatic firearm. Izuku interjected, hoping to salvage the situation. But judging from your previous choice, I think you want another shotgun. Izuku then turned back to the shopkeeper who raised a brow in mild surprise of his knowledge. For me, I'd like another pistol. Another one like Snipes would be good, though more realistic looking. Oh, and a submachine gun would work too. I'm not sure if you would sell such a thing, but would you also happen to have a slingshot? Ryuji was stunned to silence, slightly overwhelmed by Izuku's apparent knowledge in the area. The shopkeeper let out a dry laugh, crossing his arms. Color me impressed. I definitely wouldn't have pegged you as a gun enthusiast. You obviously know more than Blondie here. Hey. Alright, tell you what. I'll give you a catalog of my recommendations for you to look through. Just the beginner selection, but if you keep coming back for more, I'll show you some of the serious stuff. The shopkeeper declared, standing from his seat and walking into the back of his shop. Ryuji waited a moment, watching the shopkeeper disappear from sight before turning to Izuku with a big grin. Dude, I didn't know you knew so much about guns. Are you actually a collector? And no, nothing like that. Izuku laughed sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. Until last night, I didn't know much of anything about guns. But since we were planning to get some more model guns, I thought I'd look into them with more detail to try and help get the best selection possible. You'd be surprised how studious he gets when he sets his mind to something. Morgana said, popping his head out from his bag for a moment. He was up all night looking at a bunch of different sites for each of the ranged weapons we possess. Hey, get back in the bag. Ryuji whisper shouted, pushing the cat's head down before the shopkeeper returned. Hey, since you know what you're looking for, you can go ahead and pick mine out. Just make sure it looks cool. The faux blonde chuckled, pulling out his wallet and handing Izuku a small stack of yen before walking outside. The shopkeeper came back, reaching a hand out and giving Izuku a small folder. Go nuts. Just make sure that you guys don't go swinging them around. I don't need the fuzz coming around here asking questions. Even if they're fake, they look real enough to get you into trouble. The shopkeep warned, placing his hands on his hips. Alright. We'll do our best to be careful. Izuku nodded before turning his back to the shopkeeper and walking through the store, scanning through the folder. Okay. The shotgun that materialized with Ryuji-senpai was a standard pump shotgun. Ideally it would be better to try and get a semi-automatic shotgun. Judging from the catalog it looks like none are within the range of cash I've got. I'll have to focus on the more realistic look instead rather than the functionality. Getting Takamaki-senpai another submachine gun might be easier considering they're all around the same price, but finding one that would use larger rounds would probably up the damage output. Kid. Izuku suddenly paused, blinking as he looked back at the shopkeep. I've got no idea what you're saying. But stop it. It's creeping me out. After spending several minutes sorting through the options, Izuku walked out with several bags hanging from a strap hoisted over his shoulder, offering a pleasant smile to Ryuji once the faux blonde came into sight. Looks like you really came through. Great job. He had some trouble deciding on everything, but from what I saw he picked some pretty interesting items. We should be all set now to go through the palace. Morgana declared as he once again popped out of Izuku's bag, leaning over his shoulder. We don't really have the money for the best possible guns right now, but I was able to pick out some of the best in our price range, I think. Izuku suggested, handing a bag over to Ryuji. He even had a catalog of melee weapons. Once we get more money, we should come back and check those out, too. It was a lot to go through. Sweet. Sounds like a plan to me. Though I think I'll leave shopping to you now. Ryuji chuckled as the two walked out of the alley, taking a moment to wait for a gap in the crowd of people walking through. Please, everyone. Please take a moment to stop and listen. Izuku and Ryuji raised a brow as they heard a feminine voice jovially calling out. Looking around, they could see a gathering circle nearby, Ryuji and Izuku, sparing a glance at one another before curiously trekking forward to check it out. I would like you all to pay close attention. Izuku and Ryuji pushed through the crowd, getting a good view of who was garnering all this scrutiny. At the center was a young girl, likely Izuku's age. She had pink locks of hair that went down to her neck. The most notable aspect of her looks were her yellow eyes that looked like they had crosshairs replacing her irises. Sho wore a dark forest green tank top with leather straps over her shoulders attached to a metal pack on her back. She wore cargo pants that were stained with black grease, as well as parts of her face and arms. On top of her head was a peculiar set of large goggles with what looked like antlers on top of her head. On her feet was a pair of strangely large metal boots that went up to her calf. My name is Hatsume Mei, first-year student of UA's Class 1H, the support division. I would like to display my beautiful babies for all of you to see. The rather energetic girl proclaimed, a microphone connected to her head that connected to her goggles. The UA student Izuku blinked in amazement, immediately becoming more interested in what the girl had to say. Support division. What's that? Ryuji asked, glancing at Izuku in confusion. While UA is most notable for its hero training courses, it also has a supplement of side courses. The support division is for students who are interested in building equipment and costumes for heroes and companies rather than fighting crime themselves. Izuku explained, an excited smile spreading across his lips as he watched the girl with great fascination. I've always wondered what the support course classes were capable of. This could be pretty amazing. You sure know your stuff when it comes to that school, huh? Ryuji chuckled, returning his attention forward as he now became interested in what Mei had to offer. Thanks to UA's resources, I have been blessed with being able to create as many of my precious babies as I like. To give you all an example, I brought one such baby with me today. She produced a small trigger in her hand, grinning as she pushed the button. Suddenly the large metal boots on her feet whirred to life, Mei beginning to lift off the ground. Izuku and Ryuji inhaled in disbelief, the crowd around them mirroring the action as they witnessed me beginning to float around in the air without batting an eye. I present to you all my hover souls. I can use them to glide through the air at my own speed. Whether it's nice and slow, Mei floated forward, giving the crowd a closer look at the boots as she went around the ring. Or quick and accurate. The boots blared, wind blowing across the crowd with great strength. Ryuji and Izuku put their arms up to shield from the heavy blast of air, Morgana lowering his head to lessen the amount of impact on him. Mei flew forward, quickly ascending up the nearest building without failure, going up 10 meters in the air. Dude, no effing way. Ryuji blanched in complete shock, jaw slackening as he watched Mei climb higher by the second. I didn't realize the support course was so advanced. This is incredible, Izuku mumbled in amazement, watching as Mei pushed off the building, all the while laughing like a maniac as she now began descending toward the ground. Despite her increasing speed, she never dropped her smile, immediately kicking her legs up and amping up the hover souls. Air whirred at her feet, immediately slowing her fall so until she was 5 feet off the ground, now hovering with its usual strength. Mei pressed another button, the hover souls shutting off and allowing her to fall to the ground with a thud. Immediately the surrounding crowd began to cheer with life, no doubt impressed by Mei's invention. Izuku and Ryuji were no exceptions, both clapping their praise for the eccentric girl's invention. Dude, that was effing awesome. Ryuji laughed, unable to peel away the grin on his face. Even among the notable students from UA in the past, I've never seen someone with such advanced equipment, except for Power Loader. Izuku said, looking up at Ryuji with an equally impressed smile. Imagine if we had equipment like that for the palace, Morgana muttered, no less amazed than either of the teens by what he had just seen. Thank you, thank you. I'm glad you can all come to appreciate what my babies are capable of as well. Mei spoke once again, placing her hands on her hips. Now I'm sure you're all very curious as to why I've displayed my babies so freely to you all. Well, as it happens, I'm looking for some volunteers to help testing out my babies. A lot of the students at UA have been reluctant, so I thought I would take my scouting to the streets. Did she almost say guinea pigs? Ryuji blinked, a sentiment shared by the rest of the crowd. You see, while I have had plenty of successes like the hover souls, some of my babies don't always work out. Mei admitted without care, her voice conveying the same amount of emotion as before. I need to find someone that would be willing to help me test them out in the future. I would do it myself, but risk of injury is very high, and if I hurt either of my arms I wouldn't be able to make more babies, now would I? Mei laughed, though the statement immediately sapped her audience of any energy. I can't pay you, and the chances of heavy injury, broken limbs and possible trauma are exponential. But what does that mean in the face of invention? Please, lend me your aid so that my babies may see the light of day. Despite the energy put forth by Mei, much of her crowd had began to disperse, immediately losing interest in her inventions. Izuku and Ryuji stared in disbelief, unable to believe that Mei had so bluntly suggested that someone should volunteer for her projects without benefit. This chick is crazy, Ryuji whispered to Izuku and Morgana, the two giving stiff but small nods in agreement. You two. You both seem quite interested. Mei exclaimed, her eyes suddenly set on Ryuji and Izuku. The two jumped in surprise, both looking around and realizing that they were the only ones who remained after her big speech. Are you interested in the advancement of my babies? Well, I mean your boots were cool and all, but Ryuji began, only for Mei to cut him off as she zipped up to them with surprising speed. You think the hover soles were cool? Just wait until you see what else I've got in store. Mei exclaimed, her greedy grin spreading wider as she continued to close the distance between her and the two. Izuku and Ryuji held up their hands, taking small steps back to keep their distance. Right now I have 10 babies in the process of being made. Some just concepts, but others being assembled back at my lab. The wire arrow, the jetpack, the high-density weights and much more. All I need is a volunteer to help me test them all out. Are you both interested? Well, Hatsum-san, we both thought your invention was amazing, but I don't think. Hey, there she is. Izuku and Ryuji blinked in shock when they heard a gruff voice, both craning their heads to see a police officer just down the road from them. We've told you already, you're not allowed to use those devices in such a public area. Well, looks like we'll have to cut our talk short. Hatsum giggled despite her situation, quickly shoving a card into Izuku's chest. Use that to call me if you're interested in seeing more of my sweet babies again. I'm always looking for guinea pie volunteers. You said it again. Izuku and Ryuji blurted out, though Hatsum simply ignored them as she activated her boots before taking off, going into a manic fit of laughter as she quickly escaped several cops that gave chase. The two watched as she hovered through the alleys, giving the police no chance of catching her on foot. That chick is weird. Ryuji finally said, stiffly reaching up and scratching his head awkwardly. It makes me wonder if all those in the support class are so eccentric, Izuku muttered, eyes still wide as he processed the last minute of their interaction with Mei. Weird or not, there's no denying what she made was impressive. Morgana pointed out, a small but unmistakably mischievous smile spreading across his feline face. You should hold on to that number of hers, Izuku. We should hold off for now, but I think we might be able to come into an arrangement with this Hatsum-Mei. To be continued. This is the end of the video. If you enjoyed the story, then hit the like button and comment your favorite part, but for now see you all in the next video.